got a copy for tonight's agenda? Okay.
That's gotta be, that's not the right copy.
Is it?
I'm trying to get him to print the right copy, David. No, the one, yes, the one you got, the final email is the agenda. But this is the draft agenda, which shouldn't be here. Okay. Thank you, sir.
This is an updated one, or?
This is the one you got in the email,
Email, okay.
the last email.
Okay.
We're going to call this meeting to order. This is the Finance Subcommittee of the Holyoke City Council. My name is Joe McGivern. I am the chair. To my right is Michael Sullivan, City Councilor at Large. To my left is Peter Tallman, City Councilor at Large. Joining us in the chambers is also City Councilor Dave Bartley from Ward 3. City Councilor Jim Leahy is out of town on business, trying to get back here, but he got delayed and he's not sure if he's going to make it. He did let us know. And our City Council President, who's also a member of the committee, has a family commitment and will not be here at this time. We have a lengthy agenda, and we're going to try to get through it as quickly as we can, but there's a lot of important items on this agenda, and a lot of them that are pertaining to what I call the end of the fiscal year and the beginning of the fiscal year. We have to take care of business for the end of fiscal year 2018 before June 30th. And in the meantime, we are about to begin a budget review of the beginning of the year, July 1st, for fiscal year 2019. All of it kind of ties in hand, so we want to make sure we dot our I's and cross our T's before we end the year. With that in mind, item number one is the acceptance of minutes, which I believe we do not have yet.
I haven't seen them yet.
Motion to remain on the table.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Item number two is an appropriation that came in, request for fiscal year 2018, a transfer from the patrolman's line item, $6,682.16, and from reserves, $2,608, into injured on duty, $6,682.16, and a second line item, which was $2,608. Chair will entertain a motion to remove from the table for discussion.
Move to the table, item number 2 for discussion.
Second.
So moved. All those in favor? Any opposed? The chief, I talked to the chief and to the finance people in the police department, and most of us understand the injured on duty is just a transfer from a salary account into an injured on duty. While in a given moment in time, any patrol officer comes under injured on duty. It does not change any income, any compensation. It just merely is accounting for the injured on duty time. The second part of this is I got the answer from the chief. Earlier this year in the budget review for this year's budget, the city council reduced the sick bonus, which is contractual with the police department, by $2,608. This is the amount needed to get through the rest of the year. The sick bonus is stipends that are paid to police officers who don't use sick time and are qualified for a sick bonus pay is what they call it. Our contract, some cities are every 4 months, I believe, but our contract is more quarterly, but every 3 months, 3 times a year this can happen. So when we cut it back in last June, it did not leave enough to get through the fiscal year, so the chief is respectfully asking that this amount be restored. Would there be any questions?
Make a motion to approve the transfer.
Second.
Motion made second to approve the transfer and recommend to the full city council tomorrow night that they do the same. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Item number 3, in order to introduce under the Mass General Law, Section 44, Section 53A, the City Council accepts the provisions of the 2017 Mass Works Infrastructure Grant, authorizes the establishment of a fund and or other method appropriate for the accounting of receipts and expenditures and all resources associated with the administration of said grant. Motion to receive and take off the table for discussion.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. We have Marcus Marrero here this evening. if necessary, I thought he'd be here by now, but Mike McManus will be coming in if there's any technical questions that need to be answered. But Marcus can handle the grant and explanation and walk us through it. He has provided us with a number of items here. Marcus, you want to explain them?
Sure. Thank you for taking up this item. There are three documents in front of you. One is a single sheet, double-sided, which represents a summary of the project on one side, the description of the project. The second side is a summary of the costs and funding streams that are being used for the project. The second packet is the description in depth of the entire MassWorks application as it went in last fall. I would say, in fact, it was an unsuccessful application or a partially successful application at that time. We were able to discuss the submission further during the winter months, and we managed to get an additional award of $1.6 million under that award. So it was important for you to have the scope so you knew what you were voting on. The third 11 by 17 paper is the 100% submission documents to Mass DOT for the project. It's a little bit more detailed than what you need tonight, but I figured if you wanted to see the official documents, you have them in front of you. So that's the description of the paperwork. I don't know if you want me to get into the details of this.
If you could just provide some details, Marcus, are there any matching funds the city's required to put up, or any in-kind services?
There's no requirement with the grant per se. So the MassWorks is probably the most competitive grant in the state of Massachusetts because it's so flexible. You don't have to match it. It's a grant by reimbursement. It's used for infrastructure. So there's no match requirement. However, in this project, we're using MassWorks to supplement a project that already, number one, had funds from the state and the federal government for roadway improvements on the TIP project, but also that already had a sizable responsibility on behalf of the city. If you were to look at the summary table, the city was responsible for about half of the project already. The $1.6 million goes to replace that responsibility. So it's not a legal requirement by accepting the grant. It's just reducing our liability of that responsibility.
And that project is known as?
It's the Dwight Front and Heritage Street Rehabilitation Project. It's on the fiscal year 2019 Transportation Improvement Program. What that means is that in fiscal year 2019, it gets advertised. This is scheduled to be advertised in August. And we're lining everything up so that in August that can be advertised, and it would start in the spring of calendar year 2019. Very quickly, it's full depth reconstruction of the right-of-way, streetscape, sidewalks from the first level canal all the way to the Maple Street intersection. That part of the project, because it's categorized as a state roadway, the TIP program can cover it. The federal and state funds can cover that. Front Street and Heritage Street, which was included in the project ever since I think 2010, those are the municipal responsibility. So everything in the grant that's before you today, the $1.6 million, can be dedicated towards the Front and Heritage Street improvements.
In the MassWorks grant, Marcus, what's the total dollar figure the city would receive?
The city would be receiving in the MassWorks $1,600,000.
Any questions from the committee? Councilor Sullivan?
Marcos, you've got CDBG funds of $254,000.
Those have not been allocated yet, but most of the project will actually not occur in fiscal 19. It's in the TIP for 2019, which means it gets advertised at that point. So we're aiming now for an early August advertisement. Mass DOT estimates 4 to 6 months until a contract is completed and a notice to proceed can be given. However, you don't really start this construction in January, so we're looking at a spring start. Most of the project will actually happen in fiscal 20. So at that time, in that round of CDBG, we would be able to apply it.
What makes us certain that the funds will be available in CDBG for this particular project, that will be approved, or that CDBG will still even be in existence?
Well, assuming it's still in existence, and I know the questioning of whether it will be in existence came up last year, and what actually happened this year was that it got a multi-year renewal and an increase. So, from everything we know, it will be in existence. There's no certainty because that CDBG has to go through a process, of course, of allocating it. Seeing how it's a almost $5.2 million project. And this would be a small way of matching it. The mayor has listed this as a priority for the 2020 CDBG round. However, I would point out, and that's the asterisk at the bottom of this, we are still seeking other grant funds that may be able to replace either Chapter 90 or CDBG. But we won't know those until the fall. There's Complete Streets funding from the state. And we have put this project in our Complete Streets plan. So if that materializes, we wouldn't have to necessarily use Chapter 90 or CDBG. However, today we have to represent to Mass DOT that we have a way of paying for this.
Okay, so basically the mayor has already committed 2020 CDBG.
He can't legally commit it, but it's a priority that he would look to fund if we don't have another way of funding it.
Okay, that's it.
Councilor Tomlin?
Yeah, thank Marcos for coming down and explaining the project. Could you explain what they're going to do in Heritage Street? Is that they're going to pave that over? The cobblestones are coming out, or?
The cobblestones would come out. They're a problem to maintain. Every time, if you have to go into the street, it's a problem to take out the cobblestones and bring them back in. Once you patch it over with asphalt, you get the symptom of what we have now, which is all these patchy areas where it's no longer asphalt nor cobblestone. And it's harder to plow and stuff like that. Everyone avoids that street like the plague. Yeah. So all the cobblestones will be taken out. It will be full depth reconstruction. So any CSO piping and stuff like that will be separated underground. It's not just the asphalt. So the actual cement layer underneath will be thrown down again. The sidewalk, there will be sidewalks on both sides. And not just on one side where it is now. Sidewalks on both sides will be reconstructed. There'll be pedestrian scale lighting and trees and stuff like that. So there will be a good connection between the Dwight Street corridor all the way to Appleton Street, connecting towards the other side of Heritage State Park, the police station, and the current project being planned at 216 Appleton Street. So that project, which would be about 100 housing units, would connect very seamlessly to folks that are looking to park at the Suffolk Street garage that the city has.
Okay, and over on Front Street, I mean, that's basically where they're doing a lot of the work with the apartments, right, on Lyman Terrace and all that. Same thing basically they're doing over there with the sidewalks and the streets.
Yeah, the work that's been going on there is only on the Lyman Terrace side and the parking garage side. So we actually carved out some of the original design that was here. And anything that was on the sidewalk on the western side, we placed that on that project, so we wouldn't have to redo it now. So this would still have to do the full depth reconstruction of the street, and parts of it has never really been a street. It's an old rail line that's been severed at this point. There are two buildings there that are vacant or significantly underutilized that don't really have frontage. They have some access rights over the rail line, but there's no frontage on Front Street for those buildings. So separately from this financial order, there's an order of taking that will be discussed in the Development and Government Relations Committee, where the most significant acquisitions are on Front Street to actually expand the right-of-way, to have a uniform right-of-way throughout Front Street. So that will have sidewalks on both sides, pedestrian scale lighting. It will actually improve the parking situation down there to have perpendicular parking as well as part of that. And will provide frontage to two buildings so that they can be reactivated. Okay.
And you also said that it's possible you may get other grants. Is that something that you're doing now, putting in for the grants, so in the future?
Yeah, so I'm working with Dpw, Mike McManus. We've completed a complete streets plan. So this is part of an ordinance that a couple of years ago that the city created a complete streets policy that makes us eligible for Complete Streets grant funding, up to $400,000. So once you have the plan approved, which is what we just got, and this project is in the approval, then now we would be submitting for the Complete Streets grant. But that process happens in the fall, or late summer, early fall. So
Okay.
we would hear about that later, after this project is bid out.
Okay, and then is that a state grant or federal?
Yes, through Mass DOT, but through a separate program.
Okay, thank you.
Counselor Bartley.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman, and just a compliment to the chairman as well, because, Joe's been saying this since I've been on the board. Councilors have to come to subcommittee meetings, and but if I didn't come to this meeting tonight, which, I have an order on here, but, it's just vital. So Marcos, really important. So thanks, Joe, for imploring us, and some of us listen to your wise advice. Marcos, on this, I get it. I get the creative financing in the back. So I'm okay with it, but CDBG for 254, Chapter 90 for 107. Is there something from Holyoke Gas and Electric that's verifying their 205? Is there something we should know from them, or what is it that they're doing? Maybe you want to summarize it.
So we've taken the portions of the project that are related to lighting and electricity, so the conduit that goes under the sidewalk, the electric hookups, and so that when I say pedestrian scale lighting, think of the black historic looking light poles that are on the canal walk. So all those items, as they've been priced out, those would be funded by the Holyoke Gas and Electric. This is exactly what they did for the canal walk. They provided about that amount, probably a little bit more, for the canal walk and on Appleton Street.
So the genie summarized this for you in writing. Are they going to provide anything to the city council in writing to saying that this is, or did they take a vote? I haven't picked up in their minutes that the commissioners have voted on this. So I guess I just want.
I don't have anything from them in writing. I could certainly do it. They would have some sort of agreement directly with Mass DOT. They wouldn't be giving us the money. They would be giving Mass DOT the money. Just as they did with the canal walk, we didn't see them. We didn't see the cash directly from the genie. Another option is they could actually pay the contractor to do it themselves, but it would probably be easier just for them to send a check to Mass DOT.
No, I'm getting that, but I just want something that verifies and that they're on board with this to me, because you're asking us to take a vote relying on this. So I know how CDBG works, and I sort of know how Chapter 90 works, but the gas and electric, since they're right here, I would think it would not be unreasonable for them to provide something to us to show that they could provide that kind of either dollar value or in-kind support for that dollar value.
Sure. The only thing I would clarify, just to put you at ease, is that with the approval of this grant, nothing can really be spent unless we've secured all the funding for it. So if at worst, say that this is not an accurate representation or that doesn't get approved, then we're not really spending anything on the 1.6 because we have to make sure that we have funding aligned for this.
And I will just say this for the public, that CDGB of 254, that is a very significant percentage of CDBG funds that the municipality receives on an annual basis.
Sure, but remember that it's across different fiscal years. So I would anticipate, without having a contract, I can't tell you definitively project start and project end date. I would anticipate that this will take portions of 3 fiscal years. So it would start in fiscal 19. If there are surplus funds from any projects in 19, they can be applied. There's in fiscal 19, there's a sidewalk allocation, so potentially some of that could go to the project. Depending on what the contractor can do up front. The bulk of it would be fiscal 20, but I anticipate that the project would go into fiscal 21 for completion. So yes, while 254 may seem like a large number, it could actually be divided in 3 parts.
And is that what the mayor's anticipating?
Well, yeah, because that's what we're anticipating. The project goes on our life calendar, not on the fiscal year. So, and the CDBG allocations follow the fiscal year. So we would anticipate having to do it over multiple years.
So same, it would be true theoretically for the Chapter 90 funds?
Yes, although knowing the flexibility of Chapter 90 and how far it goes geographically in the city, again, we would look to replace that if we get the complete streets funding, which is which is more constrained in where you can use it.
Okay, thank you.
Marcus, on Heritage Street, that project has been on and off the table for the last 15 years, and I think it's one of the key streets that needs to be completed and completed correctly. Many people think those cobblestones are the original street, going back 100 years. They're not. They were put in through CETA funds back in 78 or 79. I'm not that old, Mr. Sullivan. I just happened, you and I were graduating from high school just before that. And it's a matter of, it was a great idea to reconstruct a cobblestone street, to complement Heritage Park and complement, the history of the city. But, it serves no purpose now. And there was an issue once when, I believe it was the water department came through and did some work on one of their lines and some cobblestones went missing. Is there a plan, what is the plan with the existing cobblestones? Where will they go?
I don't have an answer for that. Usually what would happen is that the contractor owns the stuff that they tear out. So hypothetically, a contractor could use it in another project, they could sell it or whatnot. As part of the in-kind work that we would be doing on this project, DPW would actually be tearing out the cobblestones, so the city would still own them. This is where having Mike here with an engineering question would come in handy. Oh, there's Mike.
Mike is there.
You
Mike,
don't escape all the questioning, Mike.
Mike, would you like to join us? Our superintendent of the DPW, Mike McManus.
Yeah, come on in.
There is some value to the cobblestones. We just wanted to know if there's a plan.
So I believe that when the Waterworks did their project, the cobblestones were collected and palletized and made ready for sale or auction. And at the time, there was a belief that there wasn't any value, it wasn't worth doing that. The quantity of cobblestones was much less than what it'll be once we take everything out. So we can go down that road again. But what happened to the cobblestones for the Waterworks project, they were palletized, they were dropped off at the old DPW facility on Commercial Street, and they've sat there ever since.
Any value, Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah. Yep.
There's value. May not be as much as we'd like to say, but there is value to them. If you could see if you can come up with a game plan, we would appreciate it. Any other questions from the committee? Chair will entertain a motion.
Make a motion to accept the Mass Works Infrastructure Grant.
Second.
Motion made second to accept and approve the Mass Works Infrastructure Grant and make that same recommendation for the full city council tomorrow night. If there's no other discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mike, you've got your name on the transfers for, our next item is the union contract with the Dpw Laborers. And then there's a couple other items that we got. You're staying for all of them?
Yes.
A couple other, not major, but minor items. So our next item is the collective bargaining agreement with UFCW Local 1459, our DPW laborers. Motion to take it off the table.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. We have a copy of a contract. We have our city solicitor here. We have members of the union. Is there, who would be speaking for the union, if anyone?
Mike Gallagher is
Mike,
here.
you want to come in?
Stewart.
And typically what we do with these contracts is we start with our city solicitor, who I believe was designated by the mayor to negotiate it. Paul, did you negotiate this one?
Negotiated it, but not designated for.
Well, I understand the mayor did sign this one, correct? But for purposes of questions and walking us through the contract, could you highlight we have, I think, three transfers coming up to pay for the increases. Could you just highlight the differences in the contract and maybe just give us the version of what the negotiations themselves?
Sure. So for the DPW laborers contract, just touching on the point you made about the transfers, I believe there were the funding items, the cost items in this are relatively small, and I believe are being taken care of with a departmental transfer for any retroactive expenses. Just if that's some clarification.
It is a 3-year contract. The old contract expired 2 fiscal years ago. So the laborers have been working without a contract in that time.
That's correct. So the negotiations on this contract began actually back in May of 2016. There was a mediation on some wage items, the cost of living adjustments, longevity, and a change in lunchtime pay recording. That mediation was held in September of 2017. There was actually a tentative agreement that went to the bargaining unit, but was rejected by vote of the union on November 30th of 2017. Negotiations resumed in February of 2018. And the parties reached a tentative agreement that is submitted to the council, and that agreement has been ratified by the union as of April 18th, 2018. So the main cost elements of this contract, if you have the memorandum of agreement before you, which should look like this.
Yes, we do. And thank you for being provided in a timely fashion.
Oh, absolutely. So paragraph number 10, Article 9, Section 1 is the provision which changes the 20-minute spot lunch to a 30-minute paid lunch. Paragraph number 20, Article 13 for longevity makes increases to each longevity step and adds a longevity step for 25 years of service or more, and that's consistent with the, I believe, the DPW supervisor union, and that was one of the items that was established by mediation. And the last major cost item is paragraph 27. This is on page 6, and that changes Article 17 to adjust the wage schedule to provide for 0% in the first year, which is fiscal year 17, 1% increase in fiscal 18, and going forward in this contract year, it would be a 1%, or I'm sorry, in fiscal 18, you'd have a split percentage, so 1% on July 1st, 2017, 1% on January 1st, 2018, and then in fiscal 19, a 2% wage increase. In addition to the cost items, there's a number of substantive changes regarding discipline, leave abuse, some other matters that Mr. McManus may be able to speak to with respect to what the department and the labor unions' objectives in getting some clarifying and productive language for the parties.
And then what this financial transfer is to essentially make our budgets whole for this fiscal year, where there were the split ones. So it would be the retroactive pay for the time worked through the end of the year. We're taking it from within an existing budget and DPW, moving it into the various categories. So item 5 and item 7 are the labor categories, and item 6 would be the changes needed for the longevity pay. And I guess the salary increases have been incorporated into the next fiscal year's budget that's been submitted to.
That would be correct, yes. And that's a good point, just to make some clarifications here, if I can interrupt for a second, Mike. I think Paul's gonna agree with me. We've got a contract before us. We cannot intervene with negotiations of a contract. Typically, the mayor is responsible, or whoever the mayor designates to do the contract themselves, and the officers, whoever are designated with the union themselves. That's forbidden by charter and state statute and all kinds of things. The charter is part of the state statutes. However, we are, in the contract is subject to appropriation, and we are responsible for appropriation. So when a contract comes before us, we usually, not always, but have the initial appropriations for the given year or the retroactive years or both. And then we anticipate, or sometimes there isn't anything until the budget cycle, but we anticipate for future years that would be in the upcoming budgets. But once we ratify the contract through the initial appropriation, the contract is set for the life of it, and we can't, change our minds and reduce a budget, in the future. We have other ways of reducing budgets, which we don't like to do, but sometimes we have to. But that's where we are this evening, and there are each of those that Mike just described are the next 3 items on the agenda, which would be up next if we don't have any questions, or, we should have questions for the contract. Before we ask questions, Michael, would you like to say anything? Job well done, I think. I like that lunch thing.
I would just hope that you kindly approve this tonight, because it's been a very long process for our side of it. We started off this contract negotiations. Sarah Carroll and William Fuqua were the city's bargaining team. And we had Debbie Reardon was the interim superintendent, and there was another city lawyer in the middle there, Amber, when Sarah left, and then we finished with Mr. McManus and Mr. Payer here. It's been a very long process. This contract, what we ended up with for raises, percentage raises, it's the smallest I've seen since I've worked for the department over 18 years. It's there's very lean times, and we got very little out of it. And I know it's tough times for the city, but it's been a lot of time at the bargaining table, and a lot of dealing with our membership and everything else, and explaining to them that we've gotten as much as we possibly could in this negotiations. And I would really like to see it finally come to an end and be passed.
Thank you. We appreciate your words. Are there any questions from the committee? Councilor Tallman?
Yeah, Mike, you stated that this is going to take, that these transfers are going to take retroactive to last year.
Correct.
Okay, and it's,
Well, for the year we're currently in.
we're in, okay, and we're already 2 years into this, right?
Correct, but the first year of the contract had a 0.
0, okay. And so you'll be starting probably next year already for the next contract?
Soon,
Negotiation.
yeah.
Soon, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I appreciate what you have to say, Mike, and I know it's difficult sometimes. I appreciate the work that you and your workers do on a daily basis, because I see firsthand the difficult job you have, and to take this contract and try to get something out of it, but not a big increase in pay. You really are looking to do what's right for the city, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Paul, I seem to remember, or maybe if I'm wrong, you will correct me, is it's against state statute to go retroactive for prior years. There are ways to do it, but you have to do it in the current year and then go forward. But we can't fund, there's a way to negotiate it, but you can't fund it, like you're funding that would have been fiscal 2016. That makes sense, or?
It does. It's a very good point. There is a state statute that limits appropriations or transfers for beyond a retroactive. I actually did reach out to some folks at the Department of Labor Relations, trying to get some clarity on that. And they acknowledge they do have, in the course of their mediations and arbitration decisions, and it's, I think, important to note that this agreement does include that step along the way. So you do have a state agency that, I guess, acknowledging the legality of authorizing those retroactives. I don't have a great reason for the why. I got the answer from the agency in that.
It's always been a stickler, because the prior years is very difficult to do under any circumstances, but especially with contracts. Any other questions? Chair will entertain a motion? Well, actually, I apologize. The chair will suggest that we suspend the rules to take up items 5, 6, and 7 together. They are the appropriations for the contract as described by Mr. McManus. On that motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I will read them quickly. Item 5, the transfer would be from within the DPW budget, pay foreman $15,501, $400 to building maintenance, $385 to labor, $5,925 to HMEO, power shovel operator, $1,335, repairman, $1,766, maintenance man, $540, HMEO is $3,820, HMEO recycling is $1,300. This total would be the $15,501. And then the item 6 would be a transfer of $5,300. This is from, again, foreman, ME repair, mechanic repair, is that?
Correct.
Okay. And these are the longevity transfers. $6,035, $1,960, $485, $1,070, $200, $950, totaling to $5,300. And the final transfer is from the pay foreman mechanical repair line item, $3,659, parking officer, $425, HMEO, $764, parks maintenance man, $2,045, park maintenance craftsman, $425, again, the total, $3,659. Mike, what, I apologize, because I should recognize, but what is HMEO?
Heavy motor equipment operator.
I knew that, right, Mike?
And the reason why there's more than one HMEOs is because of the different departments within Public Works. So there'll be, in the highways and bridges, there's HMEOs, and within refuse and recycling, there's HMEOs.
Counselor Sullivan.
Yeah, Mike, why do we have this money left in the pay for? Did we not hire somebody, or did somebody leave? Or?
We had two departures mid-year
Yeah.
in the automotive and equipment maintenance division that were not filled.
Okay. And so they haven't been filled. What's happening there with 2 people missing?
We're looking for people to fill those spots. And it's I don't want to say it's the same old story, but we have certain requirements that we want in the mechanics, and the applicants aren't there. We've reached out to Dean, Porter, and Chester. We've been looking around outside of the typical Mass Live or Career Point to try to find candidates.
So in the meantime, we have equipment that's not being kept up or breaking down and not being repaired, or what's?
So in the meantime, DPW staff have been doing the best that they can. They've been prioritizing repairs, and when repairs are needed that we do not have staffing resources to address, we will send vehicles out to Marquette Ford for police, or Nutmeg in Connecticut for fire department, in order to meet the needs of vehicle maintenance for the city.
Thank you.
Any further discussion, under discussion, Counselor Bartley?
Thanks, Joe. 1 second. Mike, how many members in the bargaining unit?
I'm not really even sure anymore. I want to say we're probably only around 40 now.
I'd say 45.
Okay.
Okay. And how many are supervisors, Mike M?
There are 11 or 12. I think 11.
And I'm sorry, Mike G, I don't have the contract in front of me. I'm sure it was emailed to me at some point, but I don't have it. It's good through when? The conclusion of the contract is when, Mike?
It'll expire on June 30th of 2019, I believe.
Yes.
It-
So it's good through next fiscal year.
Basically, in a little less than 8 months, we could we'll probably be starting the process of negotiations again. That's how long this contract has taken to settle.
Get a little break from each other, but not long.
Absence makes the heart grow fonder, Paul. So, and Mike, this is just a layman's question here, so part of my ignorance. As far as working with the fire department and the police department on maintaining vehicles, is that something your department tries to do? Do you work cooperatively with those two departments? Because they probably have the bulk of our vehicles. I mean, DPW, HPD, and HFD probably I'm guessing, the majority of the city's vehicles. But as far as maintenance goes,
But so as far as
How's that
maintenance goes, it's almost like a triage type system where the most important need gets taken care of first. So if a trash truck goes down, say hypothetically, and a frontline police car goes down, we might look and see we've got another spare trash truck that we could mobilize and use. So the trash truck repair would go on the back burner, and we would address the police cruiser.
but does
first.
HFD have its own mechanic?
They do not. It's
do
all within DPW.
Okay, so same with HPD. They don't have its own.
They do not, no.
It's all department. At one point, I thought the fire department may have had a mechanic, but maybe
They did. At one point before I started, both police and fire had their own mechanic. And was it back in Sullivan's tenure when everything was pulled into DPW as a consolidation and cost savings effort?
Okay, and then just assuming you had the mechanic had time, mechanic can work on engines and
yeah, we
pumpers
hire, DPW typically hires diesel mechanics. So as a diesel mechanic, they can work on all of the vehicles that DPW has. They can also work on the type of mechanics that a police car has when it comes to a fire truck. There's some repairs that they can do, but fire trucks are very complicated machines, and they take a higher level of sophistication than your typical DPW mechanic has innately. There's always room to grow and learn more, but there's certifications and specializations within the fire truck mechanics that is needed when you get into the pumping systems, the hydraulic systems that they have, where they would always need to go out for service. But we do the best that we can and address the problems that we can.
Well-
And we also, if there is a problem that we don't have the skill or ability or time to address, we will send that out for repair.
and that repair is by a company in Connecticut.
One of them is, yeah.
And what's the other one?
Is there one in West Springfield?
So Hopkinton, Mass, and Albany, New York. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor Bartley. Any other questions from the committee? Councilor Bacon has now joined us. Any other questions for us? Chair will entertain a motion.
I make a motion to accept the collective bargaining agreement and also to pass the transfers associated with the agreement on items 5, 6, and 7.
Motion has been made and seconded that we adopt and recommend to the full city council's items 5, 6, and 7, which are the appropriations that support the contract, which is item number 4. By the city council adopting these appropriations tomorrow night, as stated earlier, the contract will be approved by the city council with our responsibility of the appropriations themselves. If there's no further discussion on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 3-0. That will come up tomorrow evening on the city council agenda. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Mike, we have two things. I think we can get you out of here real quick. Item number, I'm sorry, yes, thank you. Item number 8. This was a communication from you to the mayor and copied to us. I think this evening, unless you want to go a little bit further, is an update on the sewer shut-off program update. I think this is a little bit more information than we had the first time. This is the second notice went out, or?
Yeah, the second notice went out. This time we had a little over 150, I think it was 151 people who received the notice. And I think I don't have the exact dollar value, but it was in the $100,000 plus range. So as you know, we're kind of following Waterworks' lead with this program. They've chopped the city up into three different rounds, and since they bill quarterly, that way they can have cash flow throughout the year coming in. So the last month was our first round. We sent out 133 letters initially. In the second phase, there was a little over 30 letters that were sent out. We wound up shutting off 13 houses, and all but one have been reinstated. The one that still hasn't been reinstated was a house that was foreclosed on that's vacant. And now in the second round, we sent out a little over 150 letters, and we're getting to the point in time where we're going to be sending out the second round of notices, giving people 2 weeks to pay or else they'll be shut off.
It sounds like it's been fairly successful.
Last month was very successful, yes. We did shave a lot of money off the past due collections. So we're very optimistic that this will help.
Are there questions from the committee?
Yeah.
Councilor Tomlin?
Yeah, you state that you send out one notice and then you give them a period of time and then you send out the second.
Correct. So we send out one notice to the property owners. We give them 2 weeks in order to pay. Then the second notice is sent out to the property owners by certified mail. And we also post on the building a flyer at the front door. This is in case it's a tenant-occupied building, and we're sending the notice to a landlord who doesn't live at that property, so that the tenant would be aware that their water will be turned off for non-payment of sewer come a certain day if the bill's not paid.
Right, and you stated that first, after people received the notice, a lot of people did come down and pay.
Some did, yes, yeah.
And then they can also set up a arrangement too if they can't.
There have been a number of people who have requested payment plans which we're willing to set up. They have to be a reasonable payment plan.
Right.
We wouldn't want to take $1 a month.
Right. And also now, if they decide not to pay it, then you notify the water department, they go up and after the period of time and turn the key and say your water's off, or?
Right, so that day that we set up is the day the water goes off. We send a list to the water department. They go out and turn the water off to those properties. There are times when the person shows up at the property, and before they can turn it off, the homeowner comes out and says, give me 5 minutes. And if that's the case, we'll give them 5 minutes. But if no arrangements are made and the water is turned off, then the property owner has to come down to DPW to pay the bill in full. And then we give them a receipt that's in triplicate. We keep one, they take 2 with them, one's their copy, the other copy they give to the water department that shows that person has paid their past due sewer. Then they also have to pay a fee to the water department to turn the water back on. And during normal working hours, the water department will go out and turn the water back on.
But that's an added cost if they don't get there.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a cost for the water department to do that as well.
Oh, right. No, I can understand. I mean, we had that problem up in Bemis Road and a lot of our neighbors, and we were only out of water for like a day and a half, and it felt like forever, so I mean, one day without water, for people, I think it's important that people, realize that it's serious. And I think it's great that this is happening because, some of the money we may never see, because of the buildings that are gone or foreclosed on. But to make the effort to pay this off, I think if down the road we look at, increasing the sewer rate, which is probably needed because of the funding, that at least we're making the effort and people are starting to pay. Because the average person is saying, why should I pay more if there's people that are having $300 or $400 sewer bills that aren't paying anything?
Right.
And I think when you really, it's like an eye opener for people saying, well, they really mean business. They can shut our water off, and I think that's it's. When this was brought up, it was a great idea. It took a little while to take off, but I think it's working, and it's proved that with collective minds together, that people put this together on the council here. It really shows that things can get done, and hopefully this will help other people look at saying, hey, things are getting done, and people are paying their sewer bill finally after a number of years. I mean, some people probably haven't paid it in 4 or 5 years. Or longer,
Or ever.
or forever. They just kept on, I'll pay the water because they're not going to shut off my water.
Right.
So I think this is a great start, and hopefully it'll continue.
Counselor Sullivan.
Mike, can you tell me, we're off to a great start, but what's your sense of, a lot of this is going to be uncollectible? Judging from the start we've had and what's on the books, are we looking at not a specific hard number, but 300, how much is going to be uncollectible? 300,000, 400,000, $500,000?
I'd like to defer to Bellamy a little bit, but in looking at the sewer billings and our accounts receivables over the years, in the past, what's happened is what we haven't been able to collect during the course of the year, we lien. That goes on to the property tax, and by doing that, we have been able to recover a significant portion of what was uncollectible. So I think we are around a 98% collection rate when you include payment of the liens. And I think what this will do is decrease the amount that gets liened, but I don't think we would be able to jump from 98 to 100% just with this program. I think it'll help out with the cash flow.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if it can be collected through liens also, at one point we saw some huge numbers out there. I think we were looking at 800,000 at one point.
That was 1 year, and what happened that year is there was a miscommunication between Department of Public Works and the Waterworks. The Waterworks is the one who controls all of the meter readings. They control the bills, and they control the software that we use in order to generate our list for shut-off, but also our list for the liens. There was a problem with the software. We weren't able to generate a lien list that year on the date that the assessors needed it in order for it to be liened. When we lien a property, the software effectively zeroes out the account. It assumes that a payment's been made and that account goes back to a zero balance. So as a utility, we don't want to lien until we're absolutely sure that the liens are going to happen. And this 1 year, we weren't able to lien any properties. So that uncollected balance grew throughout the next year, which is why when we liened around $800,000. In the past, excluding that year, we liened, $350,000 to $390,000. So I think that's why you see that one year so high as a lien.
Right. So if I follow that train, as far as the collectability of everything out there, if it's 98%, let's say it's only 90%, we're really only looking at $30,000, $40,000 in bad debt.
I don't have the numbers in front of me. I think our billings are in the $6.7 to $7 million range. So I think if you do 2% of $7 million is what, 140,000 of uncollected I think that's,
Okay, so you're saying it's 98% of what is billed gets collected. What I was asking is of the past due balance that we're carrying out there, how much of that is going to be bad debt?
oh, so with this sewer shut-off program, we're only going after people who owe at least $200 that are within a certain cycle, since we do the cycle 1, 2, and 3. So if you owe more than $200 for more than 2 months within that cycle, that's what triggers the letter being sent. We have there's a minimum payment of $5, and there's a number of people who routinely get a $5 bill from DPW, never pay it. You never have to pay a $5 bill, and it would take a long time to get up to that $200 threshold, and that's also the same threshold that we use for leaning. So I can get you a number on how much is out there. I don't have it with me right now.
Okay, but it could still be several $100,000 in bad debt then?
Yeah,
Okay.
not several hundred. I'd say it's somewhere between 1 and 2.
All right, thanks.
Counselor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mike, thanks for making the joke about $1 a month. I thought that was funny. I know she didn't get gavelled down. Like sometimes we make jokes here, we get gavelled down. So thank you, Joe, for your patience. And then, Mike, I just want to recap the numbers, and I just want to ask about the minimum payment. So in round one, you sent out 133 letters.
It was either 133 or 131.
April 24th was 131, and then after that was second notice was 43.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I had it in front of me. I wasn't sure what you were asking.
And then I was writing my notes down. You said that there were a second letter went to 33 of certified mail and with flyers on the door.
I guess that was 40 something.
43.
43. Oh, wow, I'm really good with notes. So that tells me that the difference between the 131 and 43, they either paid in full or they entered a payment plan?
Correct.
Okay, so then you had 43, and it looked like then just double check my numbers, 13 homes had their water shut off?
Correct.
Okay, so it went from 43 to 13?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, so 43 had a second notice with a flyer, then 30 of those either paid in full or they entered a payment plan. That left 13 that houses had their water shut off.
Correct.
Then I believe you said 12 of those 13 then either paid in full or had a payment plan.
Correct.
So that left one out of the original 131. Am I wrong?
No, then that one house is a vacant property. But yes, you're correct.
So I'm correct. So one out of 100. So I think that's more than, pretty good. I think that's unbelievable. So I think that's phenomenal. And I just want to emphasize a number. So when we were going through this for 5 years, because the whole time I've been on the board, we've been going through this back and forth, and a lot of thanks to Mr. Jourdain for pressing it the whole time. Fortunately, we had a solicitor then who carried the ball, but the thought didn't come from her. I mean, she carried it, got it, found the legislation, but so 1 out of 100, so 130 out of 131. I don't know what the percentage is now, but that's pretty. I mean, that merits more than like an okay or pretty good start. That's tremendous, Mike. And so I think this board, there should be a lot of the city taxpayers. I mean, this board takes a lot of heat for various things, but this board is the one that started this and saw it through. So it deserves a little bit of a, that's an okay start or way to go. That is fantastic. So I'm so happy about that, Mike. Congratulations to you, of course, to Mr. Conti. the Board of Public Works, the Waterworks Commissioners for seeing it through, and your various council, and also our law department for helping us out, and for those of us who ultimately voted on it. We didn't have a full majority, and we had a majority. We didn't have unanimous, but those of us that voted for it, I think, deserve a lot of credit than a little slap on the back. Okay, good job, guys. So I'm very excited about Mike, and thank you for your update, and I look forward to the other ones. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Chair will suggest that we were asked to track this. We also know that the ordinance committee is working on the sewer rates themselves. So I think at this time, the finance committee has done its job and presented, and thank you, Michael, for coming in this evening. And that I would suggest that the communication and the recharge by the city council to track it has been complied with.
Second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Michael, it's actually, I think, the next two items. I just put these on the agenda to make sure, and Bellamy, I need your help on this one too, because I've been given two different answers. The original order was Councilor Bacon's. This is item number, dating back some time now. On our agenda, I have no idea.
Nine?
Item 9 and item 10. Councilor Bacon's order is that the city establish a revolving fund dedicated to its recycling program on the revenue raised to purchase the larger bins. Please provide the city council with a report and generate the recycling expenses. This was last tabled, Linda, back in October of 2017. I don't think any of us were on the committee back then. But I do remember the language coming in from Bellamy, and I have that in front of me with this other item, which is the recycling program and the revolving fund itself. And I've been told by some people we adopted this.
Correct.
Is there a recycling program, revolving fund in place?
There is a revolving fund in place. I think it's capped at $15,000
Yes.
per
We talked
year.
about that,
We received one reimbursement check for $11,466.96 back in March. That's been deposited into the fund. And we're in the process of ordering and getting the containers. There was something in Bartley's order to provide a list of homeowners requesting the wheeled containers. I don't have a digital list at this point in time. It's being developed. We had we have a new recycling coordinator for DPW, and he's in the process of wrapping his arms around the whole recycling program and generating that list.
The other reason I put it on the agenda is I still almost weekly get requests for a larger bin, so I tell them it's in the works.
It is in the works, yes.
Councilor Tallman?
Yeah, I know you brought it up because I think Councilor Bacon brought this up last year, but also this order is Councilor Bartley's order, right? I mean, it's basically the same thing, or somewhat, but,
I apologize,
Yeah.
Councilor Tallman, for correcting me. It's actually Councilor Bartley,
Okay.
Councilor Bacon signed, and then Councilor McGee signed on. But
Okay,
yes,
so-
David, I apologize.
can we take these two up now then, or?
Yes.
Okay, we're taking up items number 9 and 10?
Yes.
Suspend, okay. All right, I know you just, thanks for the discussion. I just wanted to ask you a couple things on the bins, because, I understand the larger bins, and we had one of your workers going around to make sure people have enough to get the larger bins.
Correct.
But my concern also is the smaller bins that people have that maybe are torn apart or really bad. Can they bring them down
They can.
if they're really bad?
So what we do is any new homeowner, we provide 2 of the smaller bins, or if you bring in a bin that's
Cracked or halfway
cracked or
broke, yeah.
broken, we swap it out. And then if somebody would like to purchase additional smaller bins, we charge $5
Okay, for the smaller bins.
for the smaller ones. Yes.
Okay, yeah, because I mean, a lot, as people do it, there's a lot of people I know that are in between.
Right.
I have 2 blue bins, but I could probably use a third one sometimes, but I don't have enough to get the large wheeled,
Yeah.
container. The money you mentioned that was received, is that from the recycling program itself, the 11,000?
Correct.
Okay, so that's basically,
That's money that we received from the MRF, the Municipal Recycling Facility in Springfield. So that's all of our curbside recycling goes to Springfield, and that is the rebate check that we get from them. It's a semi-annual check, so this one was in March, we'll get another one in September.
so you usually get two.
It doesn't include the $5 that we receive for those bins, that just goes into the, I think it goes into the general fund.
Okay, and that, I know we had discussed this, I think, last year in finance, and we accepted this fund. We had a number, we wanted to keep it at a certain amount, I believe the 15,000, was it?
Right.
Now, is that money basically used to get the bins?
That's what we'll be using it for.
You will be,
Just to
okay.
purchase the wheeled bins.
The wheeled ones?
Correct.
Okay. And I know, I think you gave us a list, maybe last year, if there's a way you can get us a copy of the last 2 or 3 years, the money that's received,
Sure.
just to get us an
Yeah.
idea. Because I like
we-
to see how they go if, not only do you get a check back for the recycling, but you're taking all that out of the weight of the tonnage,
Right.
which is a big savings to the city too.
So last year, the table that we provided had, for the last few fiscal years, how much our total reimbursement was for the recycling. And it's gone down from, I think it was around $70,000 4 or 5 years ago per year to $20,000 to $30,000 today. And the reason is because recycling is essentially a commodity. The bottles are plastic, and paper is paper. A lot of other communities around us have started recycling programs. I know Chicopee has come online with their recycling program, and I could say it dilutes the market.
So it's not as worth as it was a few years ago.
Right.
So it's not like we're not recycling enough, it's just that
Correct. And
plastic and the paper.
but what it does is every ton of recycling that we send to the MRF is 1 ton less that we send to a landfill. And while we get a few pennies back for that ton that goes to Springfield, we're not paying the $90 a ton to send it to
The weight, so if you really look at it, that 11,000 might be worth 30 or 40,000 because you're saving on the
Correct.
weight. And I still think, Mr. Price still with you on that?
No, he's retired.
He did, okay. You have somebody else in mind, or?
Yeah, there was another DPW employee who we promoted from within to fill his spot.
Yeah, okay, because I still think there could be a lot of work done, and, I'll follow this up, but, as far as more recycling,
Yeah, I think the percentage of what the trash that we dispose of, I think it's the 25 to 30% range is recyclable material. I don't think you'll ever get it to 0%, but there still is room for improvement. Larger bins could certainly help with that, but also education within the community.
I think
goes a
that's
long
big,
way.
the education part, and I still see a lot of people don't take the time, to do it, and some of it might because some might not have the bins. And also I look at possibly the apartment blocks, are they provided bins, or is that, I know they have dumpsters, but is there anything talked about with that?
I think by ordinance, 4-unit apartments or larger are required to have their own trash collection. And that means they're mandated to have their own recycling collection. And so DPW will help out with recycling on a case-by-case basis.
Right.
We usually wait for the property owners to contact us to request recycling pickup because it's a cost to them, but recycling is, it's one of the departments in DPW that's taxed the most. We essentially have 2 recycling trucks out on the road 5 days a week, and there are some days where we'll deploy a 3rd truck just because recycling's heavy on Wednesday, and we don't want to leave recycling on the curb at the end of the day on Wednesday because then we'll be behind on Thursday and behind on Friday. So while there is capacity out there, we are limited staff-wise.
Right.
Because that trash truck that we use to collect recycling is a truck that we can't use for trash or even yard waste too.
Right, and I know you do a great job with what you have, and I've seen it on a daily basis. And I think Mr. Price had talked to me briefly before he retired about the schedule in certain areas, how it was a Tuesday, it was a busy day, and they wanted to move it to another Tuesday. But, I mean, if that's something that would help out, I'd be willing to look at that, or if the new person is.
It's something we want to look at. We just want to make sure all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed before we pull the trigger on it, because
Right.
We don't want to make a change in the schedule that people are used to, only to have to change it in 4 weeks because it didn't work out the way we thought it would.
Right, and now I noticed that you have a new truck out?
We do have
Fairly
we have one new recycling truck out that was bought through that bond.
Yeah, because I've seen it working, and you have two now, or?
We have two recycling trucks. One of the recycling trucks that was old has been retired. So we do run two recycling trucks. Our recycling trucks have a divider wall so that we can separate plastic and bottles from paper and cardboard. So we have separated recycling in Holyoke, which means we get a little bit more of a rebate from Springfield. Some communities do a single stream recycling,
Right,
where everything goes into one truckload, and you really don't get anything at all. So when we deploy that third truck, which is a trash truck, which only has one body, that truck will only pick up either paper or cardboard or bottles and cans, so that we stay separated.
And that gets taken separate down
Correct.
to the, okay. Because that was my concern too, and I see that, and I know it happens occasionally, but, you know, when people see that, they do all the recycling, and then they see a regular trash truck out there.
Right.
And the guy's picking up paper, or he's picking up the cans and bottles.
But he's
you know,
only supposed to be doing one
one or the other, right. And they do, but it just, perception-wise, people look at that and say, wait a second, I've separated this paper for the recycling truck, and
Yeah.
they see a regular trash truck, they throw their bags in. But I understand with what you have and everything, but
And we also get calls, they picked up my paper, but not my plastic, what's going on?
yeah. And that's usually, you wait till the next day, or, yeah,
Well, or wait another hour.
hour or two and they come by, yeah. Well, I appreciate it, I appreciate the work. Like I said, I think we have more work to do with recycling, but, you know, I see the work that's done out there on a daily basis, and they really work hard out there doing that and taking care of it. A lot of communities don't have what we have as far as, you know, recycling the trash and the yard waste, which is a big boost for a lot of people that can't actually bring it down to the yard, that they can leave it out on their trash day or the day after, and you can pick it up. So I appreciate that.
Excuse me, maker of the order, Councilor Bartley.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mike, thanks for all this. I was taking a lot of notes, so that was really impressive. I didn't realize Mr. Price had retired, and I just saw him Saturday at a breakfast, so I wish I'd known that then. Who replaced him?
His name is Jim Dpw.
Oh, I know Jim. I think we had a conversation about this before, Mike, offline, but we can just briefly touch on it now. The recycle bins at $5, I believe you indicated to me at the time that does not cover the cost. Am I right in that, Mike?
Yeah, I believe the cost is around $7.
Okay, so I thought I was right on that. Can you, would you ask the Board of Public Works to consider sending a communication to the City Council or whomever it is that sets the rates for reimbursement? I assume it's this body signed off by the mayor. If I'm wrong, then fine. If it's the Board of Public Works that considers it, then I would ask the Board of Public Works to at least consider having a one-for-one reimbursement. So if it costs $7 to buy the recycle bins, you know, I can only speak for myself. I would pay the $7 for a new one as opposed to the $5, knowing that it's I mean, if there's a little increase, if it was $8, whatever, but, so if it's the Board of Public Works that makes that call, I'd like for them to consider it. If it's this body that makes that call, I'd like a communication sent to us relative to this. I realize it's not big dollars, yet, you know, why do we put ourselves in a losing position and just run with it? I don't understand that, but if you would. And then, Mr. Chairman, if I could beg your discretion, I forgot to ask Mike this, the $5 minimum sewer rate, I believe I saw that in the Board of Public Works minutes, that is, and I see it all the time for residential closings, but the $5 rate, is that standard for most municipalities in this area, Mike?
No.
What's standard?
I think that the standard is no true minimum. So it's just completely based on consumption. So if you only used 1 gallon, you would pay for a gallon. But if you, in Holyoke, our $5 minimum is based off of 2,566 gallons. So if you use anything less than, if you use 2,566 gallons or less, you pay $5.
So I'm just wondering,
So, if I may, looking at other communities, like Longmeadow has a base of $17, East Longmeadow has a base of $28, Sturbridge has a base of $98, Lee $50. So for the communities that have a base, there's no real rhyme or reason. But the majority of municipalities don't have a minimum charge.
so, what's this 2,566 gallons actually?
It's $13 and change.
$13. Okay, so there is a rational basis. Who changes that rate, Mike?
I believe it's set by ordinance.
Okay. I would ask you to, again, ask the Board of Public Works to send a separate letter to this body if they would consider doing that, documenting that, so that we can get an understanding and make a rational basis upon which to consider a change in the ordinance. I don't want to file something like that on my own, but if we can get something from your body, just to say, this is what the actual costs are, and then maybe if you want to put in, you know, comparisons with the other communities you just referenced. I didn't notice any of those you referenced were gateway cities, but perhaps that might be a way to make us better understand. I mean, I don't think Lee and Longmeadow were gateway cities, and maybe Sturbridge is, but.
Chicopee?
I didn't hear you, okay, I didn't hear you say Chicopee, but, okay.
$10.
Okay, so, but anyway, Chicopee had, and they're certainly, you know, comparable community, but.
Right, and if you look at our rate versus the surrounding communities and also versus gateway cities, we are on the lower end. We're in the lower 20%.
Yeah, again, I don't want to, you know, this isn't a profit making.
Now's not the time for talking sewer rates.
No, I realize, okay, so maybe we could just think about that, if they would consider it, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Sullivan and Councilor Bacon.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Mentioned that everything we've got goes to the Springfield facility, this MRF.
Correct.
Is there any form of, we just accept what they give us? I mean, there's other companies like North Star, and right here in Holyoke, we have Sonico that takes cardboard and paper in recycling also.
Yes, and that's something we will be looking into. It's one of the things that Jim Dpw will be looking into in the near future. Do we have other options that are more economical?
Yeah.
And we're even, Sunoco takes cardboard, right? And if you go down to our transfer station that we have, not transfer station, but our facility at 63 Canal Street, you will see a large amount of cardboard that's collected throughout the week that on Fridays we bring it to Springfield. And, one of his thoughts is let's get a cardboard baling system and get rid of it separately.
Yep, good. Because I know they pay pretty good, and $11,000 biannual doesn't sound like a lot of money. So, Thanks for looking into that.
Councilor Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to thank you for getting clarification that the revolving fund is established. There was some confusion because it was not included on the list in ordinance committee as one of the ones that would be brought into compliance under the new system where they will be created by ordinance, so that will be in compliance with the new state law. And so that's where the question got raised about the revolving fund. So I think we're all set with it. We just need to make sure we have it on the list, and then we'll be all set. So thank you.
Melanie, got that? Okay. If there's no other discussion, Mike, I think you highlighted the three of the reasons that, we should all recycle, or at least two of them. Well, one, it saves us money from the tipping fee. Two, it gains us a little bit of money, not much as it used to. Three is, it's the law. It's not a request, it's the law. And Mr. Dupui's job is to enforce the law, by city ordinance that's mandatory, because not only is it about the budget and money and so forth, it's also about the environment, which is equally important. And sometimes I think we forget that message, that it's the right thing to do for all the good reasons. But thank you for enlightening us on and updating us. And Councilor Bartley?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to say that, I think a couple times on this floor, I blasted Mr. Fuqua for various things, but in this case, I've got to compliment them, because there was, as you know, Joe, there's a lot of budding communities that wanted to go to, or that have gone to single stream, but Bill was of the opinion that that's keeping them separate out was possibly a better economic advantage for the community, and it turns out he was right. And so it was really his decision to keep dual stream, and I think we know that, just reading the papers, how global markets really affect even us here. And I heard what Mike said about commodities, such as they are, but it's really global markets are, other countries are making a decision not to take as much U.S. recycling for whatever reason. I mean, I don't really pretend to understand it, but at least Holyoke is getting something back, and then I would hope we can hear from the DPW superintendent when he gets a chance to let us know what the results were of the cash. I think Peter mentioned that that we could get some feedback. How many blue bins, how many wheel bins, and then where were they distributed? And because I get those requests on a often enough I get the requests. So I would hope that we could get some feedback on that, and truthfully, Mr. Chairman, there's a lot of, school kids, others are they're excited about doing recycling. I mean, just travel in front of Metcalf School, holy Toledo, they must have 9 or 10 recycle bins, the big ones, out there every 2 weeks. I mean, Dave Rudzik and the staff at Metcalf, I know they're teaching there, because most of us know that's one of the few, if not only, schools in the city that gets out of district children to come to Holyoke, to specifically go to Metcalf for the dual language program. So there aren't too many schools in Holyoke that can say they're getting out of district kids. Well, that's one of them, and that's a credit to the principal, but also to the maintenance staff at Metcalf. So the recycling, I think, is still a very popular tool. I think Mike mentioned that there's 25% of the stuff that still goes into our solid waste stream that people aren't getting it. But if we had more bins out there, and that was really the point of this order. So I'm really thankful to the mayor for getting behind it, and for the other councilors for signing on.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Thompson.
Yeah, Mike, I just wanted to know, in case people are interested in getting some, is there a certain time they can go down there for the small bins?
We have them, I'd say 90% of the time we have them in stock.
Okay.
So whenever we're working, you can come there.
Into the office or whatever?
Into the office, yeah.
Okay. Do you have some in supply now?
We do. It came off the truck last week,
Okay, great.
so we have,
Sounds good.
we have a couple hundred.
I was thinking about getting one. I need one. I want to get it before they go up to $7, so I'll be down in the morning for 5. Okay.
Charge them double. All right, moving along.
Can I make a motion that items 9 and 10 are complied with?
If there's
Second.
no objection by the makers of the order, I agree. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Thank you, everyone, for patience. What I didn't say at the beginning of the meeting was not only are we at the end of the fiscal year, but after tonight, we only have one more Finance Committee meeting, which is on June 11th, to resolve all this before the last City Council meeting, which is on June 19th. So we're moving quickly, and somewhere in between all those dates, we have to do the new budget. So, item 11, it's a collective bargaining agreement with IFF, Local 1693, the Holyoke firefighters. We have our city solicitor with us, and the spokesperson would be the president coming in. Want to come in? I know Paul's going to join you and not leave you alone, Bill. This is the same format as we did the laborers. And that would be first, we're going to hear with the city solicitor, the president, about some of the highlights and letting us, explaining to us the negotiations themselves and the new contract and the differences between the old contract. And again, in as far as our most important responsibility is agreeing or disagreeing with the appropriation that would ratify the contract, subject to approval is what we call it. Subject to appropriation is what we call it. So if we could begin with that, and then we will get right after that into the transfers. Note, they're just before the questions come up. In front of us, the transfer includes paid chief, paid deputy chief, and the officers and the firefighters. That was inadvertently given to the city council when we received the contract. And if you look on our agenda for tomorrow evening, that has been broken down into 3 separate transfers. The chief and the deputy chiefs are not part of this contract. Although there are some connections, but there's not part of the contract that's before us. We have some options this evening. We may not resolve this evening. We'll find out after the discussion. The option would be we can anticipate the appropriations tomorrow evening. There are some issues because it's all from stabilization. We can also get questions or not have the answers this evening and be able to continue this to next week to finish it up. But with that in mind, I think we have to understand the contract and then get to the appropriation parts. Paul, could you walk us through the contract, please?
Sure. I'll start again with a bit of a time frame. This is an agreement that expired on June 30th of 2016, so it has a lengthy bargaining history. Negotiations on a successor agreement began August 5th of 2015. In October of 2016, so a little bit over a year, and 10 months past the expiration or into the new year, and about 15 bargaining sessions in, there was a first tentative agreement, which in many ways mirrors what is before the council today in terms of substantive cost proposals. There was some outstanding, so the difference is that in November of 2016, the union voted to reject ratification of the tentative agreement, and negotiations reopened on, as I mentioned, some items that were just sort of sticking points to resolve. There was a bit of a delay, however, because in December of 2016, the deputy chiefs had filed a petition for separate representation, which I think by law paused any pending negotiations with the origin group, the bargaining unit for the local. Renegotiations did resume after that petition was resolved in May of 2017. In between May of 2017 and April of 2018, the parties met And this also involved that transition between Attorney Carroll, Attorney Gould in the interim, and then finally myself. So it's been a long process to get here, but there is an agreement that the parties have reached, and that is before the council today, or the committee, rather. One other aspect I do want to clarify is that this agreement's unique in the respect that at all times relevant to this bargaining history, the actual executive authority, so the law department negotiates collective bargaining agreements, and the mayor has the final executive authority to enter them, subject to appropriation, as the chairman pointed out. However, in this case, the mayor had actually delegated his executive authority because of a potential conflict of interest, had a family member in the fire department. So at all times relevant to this contract, it has been delegated, and that delegation has passed respectively upon departure of bargaining attorneys.
The increases maybe first, in their relations to, well, the increases.
Sure. So the contract contemplates a wage increase. Again, this is we're going back to June 30th of 2016. So for fiscal 17, there's a 0% wage increase. For fiscal 18, there's a split 1.5% increase. That means that on July 1st, 2017, wages would be adjusted by 1.5%. And then again on January 1st, 2018, wages would be adjusted by 1.5%. On July 1st, 2018, for fiscal 19, there would be a 5% increase. And there is an asterisk there that indicates that 4% of this increase is tied to another provision of this contract concerning randomized drug testing. There's actually, and this is one of the items that changed between the contract submitted in November of 2016 and this contract, or rather 2017. Difference between that contract that was submitted for ratification and this one is a fourth year, effectively, of a split 1% cost of living adjustment, which would be paid on July 1st, 2019 and January 1st, 2020, in respective 1% split increases. And that is, as a further asterisk notes, is contemplated in resolution of some outstanding prohibited practice charges that the department had filed against the city with respect to reorganization, as well as a introduction of ambulance service in the city. There are some additional changes to the grievance procedure, overtime, but in terms of cost items, the next one I'd draw your attention to is paragraph 5, that's vacation days. There's an existing policy that allows members of the fire department to cash in up to 6 vacation days per year, so unused vacation time they can buy back. So this policy extended that to 10 and clarified what the buyback provisions were. So that was also some language that had been discussed after the failed ratification votes. At paragraph 7, there's a additional allowance to reimburse EMD certification up to $50 per employee for every 2-year period.
While the longevity is the percentage of the base salary,
Correct.
has it always been a percentage?
No, it has not. So that was one of the changes that was made in the contract, and that changed the tiers to a 1.5% increase for 10 years of service, 1 3/4 for 15 years, 2% for 20 years of service, 3% of base salary for 25 years of service, and then for 30 years, the greater of 4% of base salary or $3,000 annually.
Is 3,000 the cap?
No, it would be the greater, so 3,000 would be a floor.
Can you explain why percentage and how it works as opposed to a flat fee?
I mean, my understanding, this was one of the components that was bargained as part of the November 2016 agreement. This longevity component, but my understanding is that the fire department's unique in that they have, based on what certifications you have for EMT, EMD, and those sort of professional certifications, your salary is adjusted. So I don't know if you want to speak to that in terms of what the rationale was for with that interest.
I mean, we have extra classes we take, stuff that we don't get extra stipend for. I think this is one thing we negotiated in to offset that instead of asking for a stipend for, being firefighter 1 or 2 or officer 1, 2, instructor 1 or 2. There's a lot of individuals that on the department have those certifications. So this is one of the avenues we use to count, assist them with extra little pay.
So it is a change to your question, Councilor McGivern. It does change from the flat rate to a percentage increase, and I believe that's reflected in. So this is one of the expenses that would be encompassed in the retroactive, the request for retroactive funding that's before the committee. There were some additional substantive changes. Again, a lot of this was consistent with what the prior proposal had been. There's an increase to the number of military days that can be taken for active duty or reserve duty members from 17 to 22. And in terms of cost items, I believe that that is it. And the retroactive proposal, as Chairman McGivern pointed out, it was submitted in a form that had 3 components: the fire chief's contract, the deputy chief's contract, and the locals membership combined into one. So a corrected appropriation request was made on May 22nd, which itemizes those out. And specifically, the appropriation request for the local, I believe it's about approximately 142 of the amount that is on this appropriation would be to fund the retroactive expenses of the contract.
That's correct, Paul. Tomorrow evening, we'll be receiving request for $142,052.84, and that would be captains, lieutenants, firefighters, and pay alarm, and the separated ones for the chief, and I believe the deputy chiefs are are separated on the other items tomorrow evening too. This percentage of base pay longevity, is that reflected in these appropriations?
It is. The fire department executive assistant provided estimates of what the cost impact would be on the contract, and those figures are factored into the appropriation request. So I believe specifically for longevity, it would be an increase of $26,020, or I'm sorry, I think that would be annually. per year, correct?
And where are you seeing that? Are you in the budget?
That was just based off of the calculations.
Is there an impact on this year?
There would be, so that would be, I think, the estimate going forward of what the cost would be for longevity. But the cost of longevity and the cost of living adjustments are both included in the retroactive wage increase that's requested. Bellamy is shaking his head, though.
I just don't see it in percentages. Percentages scare me because they don't tell you the future. I see, even with the way it's broken down tomorrow evening, the salary increases are there. Mr. President, would you like to have your 2 cents?
Yeah, I come here to speak for the members. I really hope you guys' support of this contract. We did work very hard, and the negotiating team worked hard for 2 years to get this forward. Towards the end, we all worked together here to wrap this up. Paul was very helpful, and it's a long time coming. The members that deserve this money, I mean, they waited a long time, and I hope you guys are in support of this.
The one increase that you didn't mention, it's not in part of the appropriations this year, and I know it's going to be asked if we do this tomorrow or if we do it in 2 weeks, is looking at July of 2018, it's a 5% increase. Quite an increase.
Well, it's 1% for your standard COLA raise that we're getting, and then the 4% what we negotiated with the drug testing.
I understand.
It seems like a little bump. We did take a 0 the first year. We've taken multiple zeros through past contracts. We had a policy, we negotiated hard. We negotiated a strict policy now with the city, and that's part of the reason why it's a 4% in there.
Who does the drug testing?
It would be Work Connection, the city's right there at Hoyok Hospital. And we use their standard or whatever levels or standards Dr. Bombardier, we went by his numbers and the drug testing levels, whatever they are.
I hate to tell you how familiar I'm familiar with those standards on a daily basis, but you guys don't want to hear that, I know.
Sure.
And I'm not volunteering to do it. Okay, Eddie? All right, I'm dominating this conversation. If you have nothing else at this point, can we open up the questions? Councilor Sullivan?
Paul, regarding number 10, the residency requirement, I still don't understand. I've asked multiple times for the law department to explain. How, in the first place, do we get to bargaining a city law? A law is a law. How does it get bargained?
So the residency requirement by law is, I believe this 15-mile reflects the civil service standard for what is required for residency. So it's simply stating what the civil service requirement would be.
So are you telling me that our city ordinance is in violation of state civil service regulations?
So it's possible there's a conflict there. I mean, I think generally the question you're asking is that yes, I mean there are aspects of benefits and wage items that a bargaining group can bargain over in excess of what an ordinance provides. So Chapter 150, Section 7 contains essentially like an enumerated list of what items, what matters are beyond the scope of, or are within the scope of bargaining that a bargaining unit and municipal employer would be able to bargain over that. So that's why you see a greater longevity package, for example, over what's provided by city ordinance, because that's a matter that's allowed to be bargained under the state labor laws.
So I'll go back to my question. Is our city ordinance invalid? Is it an illegal law?
I'm not familiar with what the residency ordinance is currently. I know that that's a subject that is currently being looked at, having our, I think it's Chapter 42, our fire ordinances updated to reflect consistency with state law and conformity with existing bargaining units. So that's something I'd have to look into.
All right, so I could use some help from any other councils. I don't remember. It seems to me we made a concession on this a very short time ago where everybody on the fire department was grandfathered, but any new hire would have 1 year to move to the city. Am I wrong on that?
I believe that's still the case, right? 9 months?
No, any probationary firefighter, you have to live within the city to get hired as a Holyoke firefighter. And you have to stay within the residency of Holyoke until your first year's up, and then, according to our collective bargaining agreement, you can move after your first year of probation. But you do have to live in the city before you get hired at this time.
But once they get hired, they can game the system and just move back out again.
I don't know about gaming the system, but a lot of people stay in the city, some people don't, but they have to stay in for 1 year.
And then after, by this new contract, after 1 year, they can move up to 15 miles outside of the city.
That's what civil standards are. Civil service standards are 15 miles from the crow flies, from the border to your front door. From what I understand in our contract now, we don't have no distance in our contract. So we added that. Do we have guys that live with less than 50 or more than 15 miles away? We have a couple.
I get that. I think you guys have done a really good job negotiating your side. I'm just still curious. Where do we stand? Is this an ordinance that we should be wiping out? And I believe it's in the city charter.
Again, I can't speak to that now. I again know that there's a proposal in ordinance committee to clean up so I mean that whatever sort of outstanding inconsistencies there are with the ordinances and the state laws will be clarified as part of that.
Okay, thanks.
Councilor Bacon?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question was around the residency language in the contract also. I was very closely involved with the cleaning up of our ordinance that tightened up the residency requirement. It is our current law of the city that if you're on our fire department, you live in Holyoke. And if you lived in Holyoke to get the job, you stay in Holyoke. We tightened up that law so that people could not move out of the city after they got the job because they lived in the city. We went through this 3 or 4 years ago, and it was a big debate at the time because there was a loophole where people could be given an exception to move out of the community due to, I don't remember the specifics of the circumstances, and we closed that loophole. And going forward, from the day that we closed that loophole, people who work on the fire department that were hired after that ordinance was cleaned up are to be living in Holyoke. Now, it has been blatantly disregarded. But the language in the contract is in direct opposition to our local ordinance. And I would like to ask the finance department to ask for a written legal opinion on this.
I've asked, I've already filed an order looking for that
Well,
several
we
months ago.
don't have it yet, and I believe if this contract is approved, it is in direct conflict with our local ordinance.
Well, if I could respond to that, I mean, to clarify, I mean, first, what's before, we are talking about a transfer request for retroactive funding of these two contract years. I do want to note that this provision is something that has been bargained as part of this contract early on in the bargaining sessions. I know this was something that was in the October 2016 tentative agreement. So for the city to take it off the table, we're not allowed to do that during bargaining. It would be something that would constitute, aggressive bargaining if we wanted to withdraw or change something after the fact like that. There is a civil service. I'm honestly going to have to go and have a look because I want to be able to speak competently about it. But there is a civil service statute that does speak to residency, and it is possible that our ordinance, if in conflict with that, would not be applicable or valid. To Councilor Sullivan's question, I did receive that order, but I had asked for some clarification about what the particular application is, because generally, as I mentioned, Chapter 150E, I think Section 7 spells out that enumerated list, and it can get a little bit confusing about what applies to that. So if that's the particular concern of that request, I can certainly follow up and tie those two things together. But I don't. It's difficult for me to expand upon it now because it's something that I don't have before me.
Well, I look forward to the clarification on it. And if you could explain a little bit further, the 4% related to the drug testing, and you made some reference to ambulance services and reorganization. Could you expand upon those three items? I didn't really understand what you were referring to.
There was, in the last year or so, there's been a lot of change in working condition with us at the fire department. And one of them was actually EMS moving into our station. So that was one of the changes. So, and we wanted to sit at the table with Action, the chief, or whoever the chief designates, with meetings about how they run and operate, and we want to be part of that. That was one of the major changes. Just them coming into the station was a major change for the members at the fire department. The other change was just for when Engine 2 closed. That was part of that raise too. We had a major revamp of the Holyoke Fire Department. I mean, you guys all know that we changed everything over there. So we negotiated that in when all that happened, and that's where those numbers come from.
So, and I do want to just clarify a bit. Something I left out is that reference there to the issues with that the union had brought forward with Action Ambulance. There's a provision at the very end of the contract that establishes a maintenance committee to address those issues, and there also was reference to the reorganization plan, which generally, so this section here is just speaking that this agreement resolves those outstanding labor charges against the city. They're not necessarily tied to the compensation in the same way as the drug testing, but it's something that the parties agreed to resolve as part of the agreement.
So is there a specific percentage of money that's being paid because people are agreeing to be drug tested? Is that what you're saying?
That is what the first asterisk says, correct.
Which is a standard for the job, isn't it? That people are subject to
We
drug
did have
tests?
a drug policy already.
That's kind of standard in the industry, right?
Yes.
The additional
In many
component,
industries.
The additional stuff they add to it with random drug testing, 40% of the fire department every year is what the big change is when it comes to our drug policy.
So it used to be 100%, right?
so there was a suspicion-based policy that was in effect, and again, it seems, I believe when this contract first entered negotiations back in August of 2015, there was some activity in this area. I think there was, I'm not familiar with the specifics, but some folks here might be, but there were some news stories in the paper about, I'm not sure if it was another municipality, but there was a concern about ensuring public safety officials have adequate drug testing policies. So the police contract, the DPW contract, and now the fire contract all have language in there that expand upon the existing reasonable suspicion standard, which basically is something along the lines of, I observe somebody unsteady on their feet, I now have cause to order them to have drug testing. It expands upon that to say that, we can now take 40% randomly of the department, have them drug tested on a routine basis. It is a policy that is absolutely subject to bargaining. So it was an issue that was on the bargaining table, and again, is something that has been as part of the tentative agreement for some time throughout this process, but it is and also something that's consistent with what the city's tried to approach with DPW and the police department.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Counselor Bartley.
Yeah, okay, Paul, you may have said, I had to step out of the room for a second. Just the financial cost of the city, did you summarize that for us already? And if you haven't, what's the financial cost of the city now compared to what this new contract requires, please?
So the appropriation request that's before the committee actually includes two components that have been separated out in a subsequent appropriation request that was filed on May 22nd and will be before the council tomorrow. I don't have the exact figure here, but I understand it's approximately $142,400, and that's to fund the first 2 years of the contract that was provided to the committee, which has a term of July 1st, 2016 to June 30th, 2020. No, it'd be June 30th, 2020. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the annual cost, or that's the total cost?
That is the total cost of the retroactive cost to fund the contract, and I believe I got some clarification that longevity is not included because that is not part of longevity is perspective. It's not subject to a retroactive. Is that January 1st, 2018? So the longevity explicitly begins January 1st, 2019. 18. I tried. Get that in there.
Okay, Paul, so, okay, just bear with for a second. So the cost of this contract from July 1, 2016 to June 30th, 2020, the additional cost of the city is $142,400?
I'm sorry, I don't know if I followed that.
Okay, so let me just, I guess what I was asking is, so we renegotiated a contract, you're asking us to approve the contract. I'm just trying to get my arms around what the cost is to the city for this new contract. The additional cost, I assume that there's not going to be, the firefighters, I'm pretty sure are not going to take a salary reduction or benefit reduction going forward. So this contract from July 1, 2016 to June 30th, 2020 is going to be an additional cost to the city of Holyoke for this bargaining unit. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to get my arms around, if you can summarize, if we can't do it now, you can shoot us an email tomorrow. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot because you can't possibly have every answer. But I just want to get an understanding of what, I heard you say $142,400. I don't know what that's in reference to, but all I'm trying to do is just get an understanding of how much more money this will cost the city of Holyoke and for this particular bargain unit. Okay,
So Councilor Bartley, so I understand. I think, so you have two sort of different boxes here. One is what the cost of the retroactive appropriation would be to fund the prior 2 years of the contract, and that's limited to the cost of living adjustments. And the second is, what's the prospective costs going forward? And that is something I can certainly work with the fire department to prepare a summary of what the expenses would be in the upcoming fiscal year. But for purposes of tonight, my perspective, and I believe the union's perspective was, a bit narrowly to the retroactive appropriation, which as I understand, again, the singled out, broken down presentation of that is something that will be filed with the council tomorrow night, so isn't even before us to act on.
The incoming number, David, is, the answer to your question, it will be 142.5284. That's just fiscal year 18 to get us through the contract through this current budget.
Right, for that, so that's for this current year.
And we agree there's no longevity until July 1st. January 1st of this year, 18. But the longevity's not in this. Bellamy, come on in. That's why we got you here.
Is this on? Okay. The numbers you have before you are simply the payroll effect for 2018. At the time we submitted this, that's all we had from the fire department. They had not yet calculated the impact on longevity or sick days or any of that other stuff. They did that sometime later, and I don't have those numbers before me. But Mr. Bartley, the impact on 2018, as you see, is $142,000. The impact on 2019, which you have in your budget books, is near $700,000 because it includes the 5% increase that was negotiated for next year, as well as the 1.5% increase for this year. So that's the difference between the base 2018 budget and next year. We have not yet calculated the impact on 2020, because until this evening, I didn't even know there was a 2020 provision in the contract. So that's all I can tell you. Any questions?
Okay, thank you, Bellamy. Yeah, that at least adds some perspective.
Does that help, Dave?
Well, it adds a little more color to it. So I see on here that as of July 1st, 2018, that there's 5% plus 1.5% plus 1.5%. That comes out to 8%. Right? So that's an 8% salary raise. And then we're okay going forward through this fiscal year with the 8% salary raise. And then when we come to July 1, 2020, we add 1%, and we come January 1, 2020, halfway through the fiscal year, we get another 1%. So in fiscal year 2020, there'll be a total of 2% on top of that. So that adds a 10% salary wage increase for this bargain year. I'm not negotiating, so don't get upset. I'm asking the questions before anybody gets mad at me. So that's a 10%, that's a 10% raise. And so there's going to be a cost associated with that, Paul. I want to understand what that is. And I just want it said on the microphone what the cost is. So that's, actually, I'd rather have it in writing. So I heard Bellamy say what the variance is in fiscal year, $700,000. So we just keep that number in mind when we come to do budget cuts in the next few weeks, and we hear about that. We'll because nothing we can do about union contracts. We all know that. Okay, so then there's gonna be additional increases for the next 2 fiscal years, it looks like, so, to this one bargaining unit and this one department. So I want that enumerated as best we can. I understand that we don't even know what the possible longevity bonuses are, because those are prospective. So that's a big word for saying, we're making a guess.
So, and as Bellamy has stated, I mean, that figure, that 700,000 is estimated as part of the budget, and I can certainly ensure that breakdown is brought forward. But, again, it's, what we're looking at here are the 2 retroactive years, but certainly I understand, the concern of what the effect down the road would be. But in my role here as the bargaining agent for this contract now, it's my responsibility to bring forward the agreement and have that submitted for the council's consideration.
I appreciate that, and I want, and you dutifully performed your responsibility. But when I look at item number 12 on our agenda, and we look at how we have to pay for fire chief, deputy chiefs, captains, lieutenants, firefighters, and alarm division out of stabilization, that's the beginning of the end, right? That's the beginning of saying, let's make sure we get a receiver, Boston. When we have to take it out of rainy day fund to pay for day-to-day operating costs for payroll, I just think that's a massive problem. That's a massive budgeting problem from the department heads. So, I'm waiting to hear the argument. I think I said my position on this microphone numerous times as my feelings about stabilization should be for very narrow purposes. But wow, so that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there, Paul, anything more you want to add about the contract, Bill? Anything more in terms of what we haven't covered? I think the questions that we need to get answered are longevity, the impact translated into dollars, the impact by year. The 142 is covering the base increases for July 1st and then January 1st. So looks like it's a 3% this year. And then you explained July 1st of 2018, which becomes the fiscal year 2019, it's the 4% and then the 1%. 1% cost of living, whatever you want to call it, and the 4% because of the negotiation with the drug testing. But you also, in the contract, also says the percentages of base salary for longevity is part of the drug also.
Correct.
So the impact, we need to see the impact translated. And I don't think the longevity is in the transfer tomorrow night. So I think that might prevent us from taking any steps tomorrow night. So if we've kind of covered, we can continue with questions, but let's get into what Councilor Bartley just started, because it's the number one issue that's before us. Paul, you told us the mayor excused himself from negotiations, and we do have David, that's the original copy we gotta get back, or Brenda's gonna kill me. We do have the disclosure, a copy of the disclosure on the original copy, and we understand that, okay? Family member, and he did the right thing. But the mayor presented the appropriation to us. He signed off on using stabilization funds. And before I get into it, Bellamy, can you give us the free cash figure to date? I know the ones that are pending, but where we stand?
So far, all you have approved is $10,000.
Correct.
There's several $100,000 of requests before you, but all that's been approved is $10,000.
Well, from free cash, we've got on the table for tomorrow night is $75,000, which Paul would be your department, special counsel. We might be able to take care of the $79,000 tonight, but I'm not promising.
Right.
From a different, not from free cash, and then that would negate the 79,000. So it would just be the 75,000, and is there a balance besides that? I think the last time we talked, we're looking around 90,000, 91,000.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't think there's another one yet. There may be a retirement one pending, but that has not come to my desk yet.
Okay. So can you get us a number though, maybe for tomorrow night?
Sure,
Or
that's
maybe
easy.
We'll just,
Yeah, I
we
haven't, I
can
just,
do the plus and the adds as far as what's pending. But at best, we're looking at $150,000 if we do the IT from stabilization.
yes, correct.
And you're not gonna survive without special counsel, right?
That's a fact. Absolutely.
And then retirement is a definite?
It's a fire, you have someone, somebody who's retired in January?
If I may, it's
Yes.
approximately $40,000. It's for a farm operator retired.
Okay.
Yeah, but that hasn't come to be.
Chief, it looks like the request will be from free cash though, is what we're just talking about now.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, so here's the issues with stabilization. Okay, so we get it all on the table and try to figure it out. David said it as good as any of us can say it. Stabilization is a rainy day fund is one way to put it, but it's there for a purpose. It's less than 10% of the city budget. It supports itself. So we use it from time to time for special things. We're watched closely by bond counsel down in Manhattan by Moody's, and they don't want to see a municipality have stabilization and funds and stuff escrowed because it protects you. But if you start using it, for example, if we depend upon stabilization for this contract, we could wipe out half of it before this contract is over. Because it's $700,000 in 2019. That means it's at least $700,000 in the following step increase itself. So stabilization is to me is not the answer because we're sending the wrong message. We're going to try and free up some some free cash money later this evening if we agreed to use the $79,000 out of stabilization for one-term costs for our telephone system last year. But to use stabilization for day-to-day salaries, day-to-day operations is the wrong way to go. The mayor's not sitting here this evening. Bellamy, do you have anything to share on that? The mayor came to you and just said to use stabilization? There's no other.
At the time, all of our free cash was, I would say, spoken for in terms of.
But Bellamy, I'm sorry, can you use the mic where everybody's listening at home?
At the time, all of our free cash was spoken for in terms of other requests, so which we felt were necessary and had precedence. We can't not pay our legal bills, so those bills have been incurred, and Paul needs the money to pay the bills. We can't not pay the IT folks to continue operating the IT infrastructure of the city for the last 2 months of the year, which is what the other request was for. So
We have a plan for that.
So now, you have a new idea for that, but at the time, that idea didn't exist. So we basically said there was virtually no free cash left. So we had to turn to stabilization to find $155,000. Now you freed some of that up, so that's helpful.
I'm kind of throwing this out on the table. I'm not expecting answers, but it's a question. It's an issue. We're in this together. If we, I wouldn't go so far as David said as receivership, but that's, not unheard of. If we exhaust stabilization and we don't have the tax base primarily because we lost the Mount Tom coal plant a couple of years ago, which was our second highest taxpayer, and it's going to take us multiple years to gain that back under Proposition 2.5. We could pass a contract like that, and never mind, Truck 2, start talking about closing a station. I need to hear justification, for, don't get me wrong, because I'm looking at every one of you, and I love you all. But is it worth a contract to somewhere down the line have to close a station?
Correct me if I'm wrong, it's a one-time fee of the $142.50 86. It's not to fund the contract. I thought that was gonna be budgeted in the next fiscal year of the contract. It's just that one-time payment of the retro we're asking for, not to fund the contract.
That's
Not
correct.
700,000.
The stabilization right now in front of us is
It's
the one
just
time
our
for this
retro.
year. That's correct.
As far as I know, we're not asking to fund the contract with stabilization. We're just asking money that retro guys are
Tell
owed.
me, in the budget before us, are these salary increases in it with the longevity?
Salary increases, yes, longevity, I'm not sure.
So we have to get an answer on the longevity.
That was my question.
The.
Sorry,
we haven't
Councilman
done-
McGivern,
We haven't gotten to the cherry sheet of the budget, so I don't want to get into it tonight, but Bellamy, what is the deficit with the current budget in front of us? What are we looking to make up?
Called 2.3 million.
Okay, so we're $2.3 million shy of the whole budget, city budget in front of us that we have to cut or anticipate new revenues to come during the course of the next fiscal year. Okay, don't get scared. I mean, that's what we deal
I'm
with.
listening.
But that's the reality of what we're dealing with, and we need to do this together because I'm gonna shut up. Counselor Sullivan?
Bellamy, coming out of stabilization, I mean, we just saw DPW come in with transfers from unspent funds. There was no other unspent funds or anything else to go through here, no other transfers that could occur. Everything else is zeroed out.
Nothing of this, remember, we're in the 12th month of the year, and so there's nothing of this magnitude lying around in the city budget, no.
Well, we know there's 45,000 sitting unspent in just the forestry department. So, I mean, it's absolutely zeroed out. That's nothing else we can touch.
Yeah, there's a little here and a little there, but there's not 142 or 155,000, no.
Is it 50,000?
Maybe there's
I mean,
50,000.
is it half of it?
If you decide not to spend the forestry money on cutting trees down, then yeah, you can stop spending. But there's a plan to use that forestry money to hire
I'm just using that
freelancers to cut the trees
I'm just using that for
down.
an example, if I understand,
So-
it has to be in the fire department, right?
Pardon me?
The transfer would have to be from within the fire department.
Yeah, there's
right?
definitely no money in the fire department. We can't, I don't think Mr. Pond can even find the $40,000 that he needs for one final retirement, from what he's indicating to me tonight. Because we are in the 12th month of the year, so all of those trade-offs have been made during the year as people, try to cover unexpected expenditures, et cetera.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
Yeah.
Counselor Thomas?
Yeah, this is a difficult predicament. I don't ever remember being in this situation, but I know the council, it's difficult taking money from free cash for something like this, and there's no other money. So I don't know if our options are just to not accept this contract tonight. And we have to, if you accept the contract, you have to accept the payments, right? And where's the money come from? That's my
It's,
thought.
yes, the contract is
Appropriation.
subject to appropriation until the city council adopts the appropriation in one form or another. An initial appropriation, as the president pointed out, the contract, is on the table. But once we adopt, if we adopt the 142,000 in any form, then that ratifies from an appropriation standpoint, the entire contract. That's why we have to know what happens in future years and
Right.
what we have to anticipate. We got some questions we have to get answered. It's like, I think we're looking at holding this off for a week. We can ask the mayor and Bellamy to look at, other means of funding this year. But we got to get those longevity numbers broken down and a good idea of what the future year impacts are. It's Bellamy stated, and we know this is the end of the year. There's not much out there. Anybody want to call the police department and tell them to stop using overtime right now? I will.
It's just, I'm just, so we were gonna put this off for a week, maybe table this in for a week? And see if something comes up and we get some answers?
First, we have, logistically, we have to deal with tomorrow night. The breakdown, but it's still from stabilization, is separated. And that includes, we have one more item with the chief tonight. It includes the breakdown for the deputy chiefs. Paul, I know you explained it earlier, but the deputy chiefs are out of the contract? Do they have their own?
Correct. They're currently negotiating their own agreement. And I made clear that appropriation request doesn't necessarily apply to what is on the table. Well, I'll leave it at that. I mean, that appropriation request for the deputy chiefs is not something that's pending. I'm not sure if it was part of the May 22nd separate appropriation, if they were broken down separately with that, but.
And tonight, there originally was 11,115.47.
Correct, because that reflects what the retroactive cost would have been if the deputy chiefs were part of that unit.
Okay, but they're out of the unit. Okay, so there's no questions there, and we don't have anything in front of us in terms of their language or contract.
Correct.
Okay. They know
There's
the
a-
time's running out quick.
We're close, though.
There's an additional 24.
Tomorrow night's the last night we're receiving anything for transfers and appropriations this year. The final finance committee meeting is next Monday, and then we're working on the budget for the rest of the year. Our final votes will be on the, and Bellamy knows this, and all department heads know this, our final votes will be on the 19th.
19th.
Anything else? Okay. I suggest, and I commend the negotiations here. I understand them, and I wish, and I hope we could figure it out. But we need to table it for a week, get the answers, come back, get everything in from tomorrow night. See if he can talk to the mayor and see if he can come up with, some other plan of how to get through this year. And then we can start looking at the full impact of future years. Okay? So if there's nothing else, the chair would accept the motion to table these two items.
Which items are those?
It's the contract
6 and
itself, which
7?
is received on item number 11.
11.
And then the appropriation, which is going to be replaced tomorrow night, in item number 12.
A motion to table items number 11 and 12.
Second.
No discussion on a motion to table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Paul, we have two more to do. Let's get them done. The chief has been sitting here patiently, and I know Jeff has been sitting here very patiently, but just real quick, on item 13, it's a transfer of $11,000 from contributory pensions and into the pay of fire chief's salary. Can you get us up to date? Because we've had a lot of discussion about this, and Chief Pons and I have had discussions about this, and it's become very confusing.
Sure. So one bit of information I have after we spoke, Councilor McGivern, is that there is a state law that establishes the authority for municipality to enter into contracts with fire chiefs to establish salary, and that is the basis that the existing agreement establishing the salary at $120,000 per year was entered into. I believe it's Chapter 41, Section 108(O), and there's a provision in there that does state that that authority supersedes any local ordinance or bylaw, personnel rule to the contrary. And so I understand that is the question was asked in my department, and that was the answer that we obtained.
And that's for the first time ever when the contract was 2015 with the chief. Prior to that, there were no contracts for the chief of the fire department's salary.
That's my understanding.
Okay. Chapter 40, I'll take you, I think we'll all check it, but I'll take you The answer is for the establishment of the first time was under Chapter 41, Section 148. Now answer the question, subject to appropriation.
Everything's subject to appropriation. So I understand the last 2 years of this contract, the council had appropriated a figure less than $120,000, and there subsequently has been a transfer that's been put in to have that figure go to 120 under the contract.
A transfer, how was the transfer completed?
I'm not sure what the specific transfers were. The chief may recall, or Bellamy's still present, he may recall, but some departmental transfer into the salary line item. And that was for the first 2 years, and of course, there since has been a change in the ordinance that would require city council approval.
But, you know, that's, I'm sorry. That's circumvents subject to appropriation by the city council. If the city council made the vote to cut the item in the fiscal year 2016, that null and voided the contract. It should have been renegotiated, and a new appropriation should have been put in front of the city council. Yes, no?
The question was asked of our department, and in reading Chapter 41, Section 108, it provides that the appointing authority can establish the salary. It's not like a collective bargaining agreement in the sense that the first year appropriation ratifies the contract. I don't see how the failure to appropriate would invalidate the contract as a whole, absent a provision similar to what is said for CBAs, that they must be ratified by appropriation.
When the chief of police is hired, since 1991, when Mayor Dunn allowed the city council to confirm the chief of police, and the chief of police's salary would be by contract, the initial contract for a new chief of police has always come before this body. And if we did not vote for it, that contract was null and void. What's the difference?
Again, I mean, the question's asked, what authority is there to establish a contract for a fire chief? I mean, that's what the statute says.
I'm accepting Chapter 41 at the moment, subject to appropriation. You said everything is subject to appropriation.
May I clarify something, please?
Please, Chief, welcome.
That was not my first contract. My first employment contract with the city was 28th of December 2011 under the Pluto administration. That's the first contract. Then it was
Never
renegotiated
seen
in
that.
2015.
We have never seen that contract. All contracts are subject to appropriation to be brought before this body. And you and I talked about this in 2015.
2015.
The agreement that the law department has given me was signed in November of 2015.
The most recent contract.
Yeah, well, there is no contract right now because it needs to be renegotiated.
There's a specific statute that says that an appointing authority has the power to define the salary by contract of a fire chief. It's subject to appropriation. When the appropriation wasn't made, it was funded to meet its contractual obligation. Unlike a CBA, there isn't a provision that requires it to be ratified by appropriation. So based on that understanding, I mean, if you know, I'm being asked, you know, tonight, that's my understanding, that the municipality could still seek to enforce the contract, or the parties could seek to enforce the contractual terms by any lawful means available to it. And then further, that provision allows for a funding mechanism that supersedes any local ordinance or personnel rule with respect to funding. So that's my interpretation of the statute. I understand it's one that it doesn't bring a resolution, but it's the answer that we've arrived at.
So let's say we're in disagreement here, okay? What's before us tonight? It's a $11,000 transfer.
What I understand is before us tonight is a stabilization transfer that's based off what the retroactive cost would have been for the 2 contract years of this local agreement. I don't think the deputy chiefs or the fire chief, as that May 22nd request clarified, I don't think those 2 aspects of it were intended to be part of it, but this conversation and a larger point of the chief's contract, I understand, is germane to getting a resolution, but I don't think it pertains to what's before us tonight, because it's not a appropriation that we would be able to, or the council would be able to vote on, because it's invalid by having a rider attached to a ratifying CBA item, hence the May 22nd clarification.
All right, but this is not coming from stabilization, it's coming from non-contributing pension line item into the chief's salary.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
Okay, so we're not even on
That's good.
stabilization, but what's triggering the increase of the salary by 11,000?
So my understanding is there's a provision in the CBA that allows for an increase consistent with what the local contract is provided for.
With the firefighters contract?
Correct.
All right, so this doesn't take place until we settle with the firefighters?
That would be correct.
Excuse me, that's incorrect. The difference is 11,000. The pay should have been 120. City council cut it to 109. 11,000 makes up the difference to the 120.
Contract.
The contractual obligation by the city.
Chief, that was a cut made last June. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Any questions from the committee? Councilor Sullivan?
Bellamy? We just went through, on the firefighters contract, everything had to come out of stabilization, and now all of a sudden we just found $11,000 in non-contributory pensions. How much more is sitting in non-contributory pensions, or does this wipe that account out?
This wipes that account out?
Yes.
It just so happened there was just $11,000 and matched up with this number. That's
Ask
exactly.
the chief, he found it.
Actually, yeah, there's probably an odd number, and I don't know the exact amount. I have the budget in front of me, $100 extra, I'm not sure, so.
So there's there's not another 145,000 lurking? somewhere?
No.
Okay.
No.
There's not. I've been saying it for years.
Councilor Tomlin?
Yeah, I just had a question, and going back to the other, I know they can't vote on it, the 155. There was amount there for the chief, 2,000 something, so is that something totally different? That goes with the contract
That may have been what I was.
you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay, so this is non-contributory pensions. Is that something in your budget, chief, that is in there, amount in there every year? Is that amount there?
Yes, sir. There's a varying amount. I'm not sure what it has to do with it. It comes in from the auditor. It's for retirees in the past. They get paid out of that line item. And as those retirees are deceased, then that amount starts to shrink down.
Okay, and
So
that's not in the city, it's in the fire department's budget then?
Line item.
Line
It's a
item.
small number in there. Yes.
Okay, so that's just money that this past year has gotten in there because of,
Correct. That someone deceased, and that's the amount that was left in there.
left in there, okay. And in other years, it might only been 6,000 or 7,000. In some years, it might be 20,000.
Well,
Could you explain that to us? On
Yes.
that? Yeah.
Many moons ago, employees didn't have to join the pension plan. More recently, everybody joins the pension plan. But for those old timers who were considered non-contributory pensioners, the city, through the city budgets, pays their pension. But they're all dying off because, they joined
Age-wise.
this years and years and years ago. So every year, the amount budgeted gets less and less. Now, this year, one of them died off early in the year, and so there's all this money left over. But that
Okay.
doesn't happen every year.
Okay, so like, let's say next fiscal year, could there be just $100 in there? Or could
Yes.
there be more?
Yeah, next year there could,
Whatever left
there could
over.
be nothing in this account next year if all of them have died off.
Okay, and the city doesn't put money into this account?
Well,
It does.
it's in his budget. Yes, it's in his budget.
Okay,
The line item comes from the auditors.
from the auditor, okay.
We don't do anything with it, and the fire department just sits in there, and they get paid out of
And
it
I just
somehow.
see,
Yeah.
I mean, and
It's
I understand,
interesting.
yeah, it's just there, but it just seems, I mean, you found that money to be transferred to make the difference in your pay, but it might not have been there.
Correct.
Could have been, and then you wouldn't have any way to find any kind of the money to get
Correct.
out of this. But it's legally, you can transfer this money because it's in your budget.
Under personnel, correct.
Under personnel, from one personnel item to yourself, because it's a personnel
Correct.
number. Okay, just gives me a better understanding, because I'm just trying to figure out, and I know years ago that they didn't contribute, so
Right.
the money to happen to be that amount there, it's just good to find it, I guess. I mean, you would know anyways, you can see the budget, right?
I could send you exact number that's left in there. I mean, it's not,
Hardly anything. Yeah,
it's just,
I appreciate it, thank you. Thanks, Bellamy.
So if I just may, I spoke with Bellamy. I wanted to clarify something. When I last looked at the agenda, I have to apologize to the committee as well as to the chief. When I last looked at the agenda, I was looking at this item 12. That's kind of where my focus was tonight. So I was thinking we were talking about a transfer from stabilization. I do want to reiterate and clarify something I said earlier, which is that, and since I don't have a copy here, I do want to just read an excerpt from the applicable statute that we're speaking of here. Any city acting through its appointing authority may establish an employment contract for the salary, fringe benefits, and other conditions of employment of their fire chief. And the second paragraph does state explicitly that said contract shall prevail over any conflicting provision of any local personnel, bylaw, ordinance, rule, or regulation. Accordingly, the statute is saying that although every expense a municipality incurs requires an appropriation, there's nothing that would prevent a municipality from honoring its contract by funding the salary line item, even if that municipality had an ordinance on the books that said that council had to approve transfers into salary line item, because the statute is explicitly saying that fire chief contracts are not subject to a personnel ordinance. So that is the reason, why ultimately the law department has come to that position.
It's not an ordinance, it's the charter. The charter is part of state law. What you just said doesn't supersede the charter.
Well, in terms of the requirement for,
You said local. This is the charter with the state. That's above Mass General Law.
I agree, but to the extent that council approval is required for the ordinance that requires the council to approve any salary line item transfer, that would not apply. If there's a charter requirement separate that I'm not observing here, then I'm willing to be corrected. But if the only reason that this couldn't have been accomplished by departmental transfer is because of the ordinance, section 2, whatever it is, as it had been in the first 2 years of the contract, then, the position would be that the statute says that that ordinance does not obstruct it. If there's a charter requirement, then of course, but.
Councilor Bacon.
So relative to that law that you're referencing, it does not say subject to appropriation?
Correct, but I would agree that.
Does it say subject to appropriation?
Does not. But I would agree that any statute that says a municipality can contract is subject to appropriation.
Right, because if we follow the logic of your argument to the other aspects of the budget, then there would be no practical reason for the city council to exist to make cuts to the budget if they could simply be refunded when somebody finds the money and moves it from one place to another. I mean, there would be no point to the process.
And certainly that would be true if, if a statute were to say that anytime a municipality enters into a contract with any type of employee, these personnel ordinances do not apply. But we're talking about a narrow instance here of what the state has provided for police and fire chief contracts and police and fire chief contracts alone, whereby they're providing that special circumstance.
So you're saying that for 2 positions within the city, the mayor could determine any salary under the sun, and the taxpayers would have to pay it, no matter what. If we didn't have the money, the city's broke, one person enters into a contract with another person and he could make that contract $300,000, $500,000, and because he signed the contract, we would have to pay it and there would be no recourse under that state law? There's no ceiling, there's no nothing? It's open checkbook? I just find that stunning.
If you're looking at the first 2 years and how that
No,
operated.
I'm not. I'm looking at what you're saying about
Right.
what the law is. That's what I'm looking at. And I really would ask the Finance Committee to request a written opinion on this. I just don't understand it. I'd like to see it written out with all the complexities laid on paper.
I'm happy to provide that. I certainly
It
understand.
just doesn't make
Councilor
sense to
Bacon.
me,
Yeah.
that's all.
And,
I would
and
just-
to have the conversation, in real time as opposed to a written document, observing that it's the personnel line item presents that difficult question that deserves that sort of scrutiny.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor
Just had
Tallman?
a comment. So, in other words, through the year, this was cut by us last June. So through the year, you weren't getting your full pay.
Correct.
And this is what you're missing out at the 11,000.
Correct.
Okay. I'm just trying to figure out, and I think part of it, our confusion is about the contract. If we didn't see the original contract or it was voted on, you got your pay. This was the first time your pay got cut over the years, or was it cut before?
The year before, I believe, Kevin Jordan cut it.
And what happened then? Was the money?
Money was transferred back in.
Cut anything.
It was back in through?
Cut anything.
Yes, through the budget process. Just like if I'm short on overtime, then I look within my own budget first before I come back here. It's the same thing. Just transfer money over.
Okay, but that wasn't just Kevin, it was a majority of cut.
I believe the council voted
Over
to
AP,
breach my
yeah.
contract, yes.
Okay. So this is basically the second time your contract was cut and you were short. So every pay period or whatever, you didn't get your full pay
Correct.
because it was cut. Okay, so our job here is to either vote for it or not vote for it,
That's
basically.
correct.
And the money is transferred from a line item that's approved by the auditor, non-contributory, that is there.
Correct, within my budget, the fire department budget.
Any further discussion? Any questions? Any motions?
I would like to make a motion to approve the transfer from non-contributory retirement into the chief's salary line item.
Second.
A motion to approve the $11,000 from the pensions line item into the paid chief's salary. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Motion carries 2-1. It'll be taken up tomorrow night at the full city council.
Thank you.
Can we jump over? We can do 14 without,
Longevity thing.
I don't think we need Bellamy, but can we do 15 and get poor Mr. Burkhardt out of here?
Yeah, we suspend the rules, take up item number 15.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? This has been an ongoing dispute with the building commissioner. This is a transfer to rectify what happened earlier this year in the budget. And this would be a transfer from local inspector $6,237 to building commissioner $6,237, reflecting a dollar amount that was narrowly cut from the budget earlier this year. Paul and I have had a similar discussion, and Jeff and I, Jeff, you're representing, I'm sorry, Supervisor. Thank you. I apologize. And again, I'm even sure, I don't want to make this trivia, but I'm sorry you had to wait this long. No problem. It's the end. Yes, it is. You're a good man, and your talent is incredible, and we're just running out of time. I apologize. Paul, will you get us up to date? This is Damien's negotiated salary, which at the beginning of the year, we did not have the MOU until after last June when we took this vote. And there is an MOU which I believe, I know I've been emailed it, but I believe it's been filed with the city clerk.
I think it's been sent by email a few times. I have copies here. If
we
anybody's
could
still,
share the copies for purposes, we get copies during these situations from all angles in different ways, and that's fine. But there always has to be an original filed with,
Yep.
you wanna, okay, you sure? We can share. All right, do you wanna just hit the highlights, Paul, of this, the reasons for this salary increase and?
Yeah, I know we've, I think twice before, appeared to discuss this. Essentially, there was a memorandum of understanding. I'm actually looking at a time frame here. Sorry, just a second. I'm bummed to find I don't have that. That would make my life easier. But essentially, the appropriation, the first year, so there's 3 years that we're looking at here. Fiscal 18, which was the prior budget hearing, fiscal 17 and fiscal 16. So fiscal 16 had at that point, the salary was something like $66,000. That sounds right. And then that was what the MOU had increased it to. Well, that's exactly what I was looking for. So fiscal 16 appropriation was $66,837. Then the CBA was executed, which had a performance pay provision. And in accordance with that performance pay provision, which is absolutely subject to appropriation, there was a memorandum of understanding adjusting the salary to $74,000, which in that MOU also explicitly says subject to appropriation. So here's where things do get a bit confusing. The fiscal 17 appropriation was made for $70,000, which ratified 2 different cost items. Well, 1.5 cost items. The first was the cost of living adjustment. So it went from $66,837. The cost of living adjustment was approximately $2,000. And then there was about $1,158 that basically was just an increase. So it wasn't the full increase. The council essentially said, we're not appropriating the 74,000, we're appropriating 70, and that 70 is recognizing the cost of living adjustment and essentially $1,100 for the general increase. So it's not fully a ratification of the memorandum of understanding, but it's some acknowledgement there. So going forward in time, a budget transfer is made in the amount of $5,110 to increase the salary to $75,110, which would be the amount of the memorandum of understanding increase of $74,000 plus the contractual cost of living adjustment. In May of 2017, the mayor requests for the fiscal 18 budget the salary in the amount of $76,237, which is the $75,000 plus the cost of living adjustment for fiscal 18. The council appropriates $70,000 in fiscal 18, and thereafter, the individual, the grievant, files a grievance for enforcement of the memorandum of understanding. As we've discussed at the prior finance meetings, there's absolutely an obligation to fund the cost of living adjustment. So that would include what the cost of living adjustment would have been in fiscal 18 off of the $70,000 amount. So that's an absolute given. And I understand in speaking with Councilor McGivern that a separate appropriation would have to be filed for just that item if that was a proposal to fund just that aspect of it. But what the grievant is arguing for and seeking here is funding the full memorandum of understanding. From the city's point of view, it's a gray area whether the partial funding of the memorandum of understanding in fiscal 17 meant enough to say that it was binding to appropriate the performance evaluation pay in subsequent years. I think that's a gray area. But what's ultimately before the finance committee is whether or not to approve a memorandum of understanding which reflects a performance-based evaluation process which is laid out in the Professional Supervisors Association contract, which is fully subject to appropriation. I think the effect of a no vote would appropriately be to have a appropriation filed to correct the cost of living adjustment, which would be an appropriation that I would advise is a contractually obligated appropriation. This one is not. At the end of the day, it is subject to appropriation, but it does follow a performance evaluation process that seeks to reflect fair pay for excellent performance. And I think the city, in executing this memorandum of understanding, sought to recognize that.
What's the dollar figure on the COLA for this fiscal year, this current? I get what you're saying, but what's the difference of the 6,237? How much is it?
Not for this existing fiscal year of that. Well, it would assume. Jeff, is it 1.5% each year? Yes. It'd be 1.5% on $75,110. So it would be the difference between, I believe the COLA is the difference between the 6,200, the 6,000 something amount and 5,110. That would be what your COLA is.
Wouldn't the COLA go on 70,000? He wasn't paid 75,000. COLA goes on
The
his pay.
Right, the request would be consistent with what the funded MOU was throughout the course.
But his pay was 70.
And that would be the amount that I would agree would be the contractually obligated amount to pay.
COLA would go on the 70.
If
If you
the 70,
assume
if the 70 is
it's
correct.
obligated.
The 70 is, and I'll explain what I'm about to say is, the 70 is the question, is the 70 correct? And you've got the exact question that we have to answer, Linda. Jeff, the MOU was originally 2016. Was there an appropriation made that year into Damien's salary?
Best of my recollection, it was.
An
The best of my
increase?
recollection for that first year, I thought it was.
And the reason I ask is if, you know, and this is I can't say it's the first time I've seen it, but this is the MOU that, you know, that if we did agree to it, then it goes into the same thing like we're looking at the firefighters into future years, and we have to be aware of it. When Linda's question, you know, is what we're trying to resolve is in June for this year, starting July 1st, fiscal 2018, in June, we reduced the salary after the MOU was agreed upon in the prior budget. Is that the argument?
I'm sorry, can you restate that? I didn't follow.
The MOU went into effect in May of 2016. That would have been fiscal 17 budget. So if it was ratified then, and then the increases that came in fiscal 18 were part of the MOU. And that's
That's where that partial ratification is, because you
Yes.
have the COLA being funded, but only 1,100 of the, of what would have been a 5110 appropriation. So approximately 20% of the, and you know, I don't know why, but I always misspeak when I talk about this. The MOU was not directly related to the performance evaluation. It was specific to the addition of the demolition crew there.
Yeah.
But this also is
employees.
yeah.
Jeff, you represent a small body, but a very important body that quite frankly has gotten the short end of the stick over the years in terms of increases and you know, just cost of living for jobs well performed almost across the board, including yourself.
Thank you.
Is the body, when this was negotiated, because most of the time, you know, bodies, this original, you know, forming of this association was to do a collective approach towards, instead of the individual approach, which was done prior.
Correct.
Was the body in agreement with this, even though it's singling out?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so there's no
We
question.
acted in the best interest for our members.
Okay. Linda, I'm not sure I didn't directly answer your question, but why don't we get back to what you were saying about the 70,000?
Well, if we accept the fact that a COLA should be paid, then it would be paid on the amount that he earned, not on an amount that was proposed and not paid. And my other question is, who is on the maintenance and demolition team? To my knowledge, there has never been one formed. There's one guy, the supervisor. So there is no team. We created positions for a team that was never filled, and the monies were moved into other line items for the last 2 years.
He's considered a maintenance supervisor.
Right, but I'm just saying, if it was an expansion of the department and we're paying out this performance-based raise based on the fact that we expanded the department, it was not expanded. So I'm just saying, if we're setting performance criteria, they need to happen. We don't have
But also,
the
if I may,
team.
just to keep in mind that when the previous building commissioner was here, there was only 4 members in that department. There's now 9. So within that short period of time, they've added 5 positions.
It's not the performance basis.
Any other discussion?
Joe?
Counselor Tomlin?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the total here, and I'm just trying to figure it out. I mean, and I understand there was a certain salary, he got an increase in pay, and we're basing the COLAs on that increase, right? That's what the difference is? and not the original, not what he got paid. So that's, I'm just trying to figure out the total. It looks like there's two increases here, COLAs, but based on the 74,000 and not based on either the 70,000.
Yeah, so
'Cause it was cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My understanding is that this is, I mean, this is the most, so this is assuming that the year that it was not fully funded, it's assuming that it was fully funded and the appropriate COLA adjusted to the prior 74,000, which was not the appropriated amount, but that would be, if you were entering a fiscal year, you would base the COLA on what that salary was at the time of the budget, not necessarily what it was appropriated before. So if somebody received a raise mid-year, their COLA would be on that mid-year raise. So what the appropriation figure includes what the full funding of the 74,000 with the COLA, and then subsequently what the COLA would have been, not on 70,000, but what the COLA would have been on the 75,110 figure.
So basically, what I'm seeing here, though, I think he's looking at getting the money that he wasn't received that was cut, plus the two COLAs.
Right.
So that's where the 6,200 is, right? Basically?
That's my understanding, and I understand it's a relatively complex thing.
Oh, it can be, yeah. And the money is coming from one job. You said he has 9 people in the office now, but there was a position there that was cut? Or there's just this extra money in there, local inspector? Was that just funding that was in there?
I believe what happened was the local inspector was a position that wasn't filled,
I believe somebody left, and so the position was open for a couple of months.
and then there was a CDBG inspector that was then hired into that position, so it was vacant for a period of
A few months.
yeah.
Oh, so this is funding that's in his budget because somebody had left and there's transferring. So basically, you're trying to make his salary whole. Is that what it is? Basically. And that's something we got to look at and decide whether it was based on his salary before or his salary that the mayor gave him, the increase.
Correct, and it would be the
Although
latter.
it was cut.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay. Just gives me a better understanding on how this all is playing out here. And I understand, I'm glad Counselor Vagan brought that, because I remember that those positions, I think Mr. Sullivan brought that up about, the team,
It was
1 and
never
2.
formed.
Yeah, it was, we put the money in there and then
Right,
there wasn't.
never happened,
Yeah, but you have one person though.
right.
It's a maintenance supervisor overseeing, is that some building demolition or? Jeff?
I believe it's building demolition.
One
I
person
believe it's demolition and maintenance,
in maintenance?
right?
I can answer that for you.
Okay, good. You could.
Answer.
That's it.
Don't take up any time, because Counselor Bartley's next.
Yeah. They've done a half a dozen building demolitions as well as boarding up buildings, checking on the conditions of other buildings, and it's been quite a process, I'll tell you. And I don't think it's a Damien, I know, I want to get into the whole evaluation thing. He accompanies these guys on these things, and they're going into buildings that are gang infested, drug infested. I know the fellow, the demolition guy, he came out and he had to completely fumigate his personal vehicle and burn his clothes afterwards. So what these guys go through in this project, it's way above and beyond the call of duty, I'll tell you that much. Not to mention the condition of these buildings, the collapsing structures. They had the staircase collapse in the armory. I mean, I've got no issues with the performance of this crew or the supervisor.
Counselor Bartley.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, just for, I really appreciated what the chair said to the firefighters that we're trying to work on this together. But I just make 2 points for the committee. So, point 1 is the budgets that we voted on last June set the salary. Those were the budgets. Your vote you just took a few minutes ago by 2-to-1 majority, and the vote I assume you're going to take in a minute, is going to countervene what this full city council voted on last June. Second of all, potentially countervene. Second of all, these are department heads coming to us virtually at the last minute of a fiscal year. We got a few bucks left over in our city departments' budgets. Let's not put that back into general fund. Let's give that out as salaries. Salaries that this body already voted on last June for the fiscal year. So your actions are actually countervening what we did. Now, whether you lost that vote, I don't remember the votes, frankly. And for a department head to specifically point out a specific city councilor is outrageous. As Councilor Tallman pointed out, it's the vote of this body. For any department head to say it's one city council doing that is really off the wall. And it's unfair. So, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to vote tomorrow night the way I'm going to vote. But I don't want to pretend that this city council is voting on voting to fulfill somebody's contract or fulfill somebody's obligation. That's not how it works. We voted last June on what's budget for the department has. That's how it works. And now, talk about the height of hypocrisy. We got a couple bucks left over. We got 11,000 here because a dead person died early. Oh, hooray. So now there's 11,000 left over for the fire chief. He just said it. And you know he just said it. We got $11,000 left over because somebody died early. Now we're saying we got $6,200 left over because somebody quit or left the job early. So we got some cash left over. Gentlemen, I'm just saying there's a certain bit of hubris and a certain bit of hypocrisy in this. This is not a matter of respect or disrespect. It's not that, because I respect all of you, and I respect these aforementioned department heads, and what Councilor Sullivan just said, that's completely accurate. But, come on. I mean, we are at the 11th hour. Maybe I use a bit of hyperbole with receivership, although I'm not the first person in this room to say that. And I don't think I'm the first person in this room to think that, but wow, that's just something to consider. Thank you.
Just, thank you, Councilor Bartley. Just a couple clarifications. This request was originally received by the full City Council in February of this year, February 6th. This is the third time this committee has brought this request up. The first time, I think, in my opinion, with the MOU that goes back to 2016, which I now understand my own confusion. David, it was a one vote difference vote in June of 15 members. It was, I believe, I'm not sure if everybody was present, but I think it was a 7-6 or a motion to cut, and the 7 prevailed and cut the item. But regardless, I take what you said and I understand it. But I want to explain my vote. I didn't vote to cut this in June for reasons that the building department and understanding the work of the building department and the understaff, and I do believe the performance of Damien is probably as good as many of our building commissioners, in previous years, if not better. What I'm hanging my hat on, though, is that the MOU was ratified when we allowed the salary to go through in fiscal 2016. And the MOU is still good for fiscal year 2018 now, even though the City Council didn't make the cut. I believe if the City Council, it's not this committee, chooses to restore the money, it restores the money that honors the MOU. And I thank you to Mr. Burkott for explaining that the full membership is in agreement with this. We're not going to agree 100% on this, I understand, but that's just where I'm coming from. The difference is that this was actually acted upon with an appropriation in a prior fiscal budget. And now that that's clarified, I will open up the floor for any further discussion. Councilor Bacon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would ask that the information for the council meeting seeing that it's likely that the committee will vote it to the council for approval, that the members of the maintenance and demolition team, that is the basis for the performance increase, is provided to the council. To my knowledge, there was one person hired. No team was ever formed, so I would like to be informed at the full council as to who is the maintenance and demolition team. We created, to my recollection, 3 positions. To my knowledge, they have not been filled. 1 position was filled, as far as I know, and I may be misinformed, so if I am, I'll stand corrected. But if that was the performance criteria, I'm not seeing that that criteria was completed, and I am reading it in front of me that it said that.
Bellamy, can you give us a list of positions that are filled this year? That are occupied?
In that department?
I think I can answer that.
You can?
No, that,
I think I can answer it.
If I can just recognize Councilor Sullivan for a second, then Councilor Bacon can clarify.
well, we created in the budget specific positions that are the basis of this MOU.
We created 1 position. It was requested 3 positions. We only funded 1 position.
In the last budget, this was prior to that. This MOU was signed in 2016. Not 2017.
Initially, there was a supervisor and at least one, I'll call him helper.
It was either 1 or 2. I can't
One or
remember.
2.
I believe we created 3 positions that were never filled. 1 position was filled
One was,
this year. There is no team. There has been no team.
However, there is a DPW employee who is seconded to the building department quite often to work on that team.
And that's wonderful teamwork, and I applaud it, but it doesn't meet the test of the performance criteria in this MOU.
If I could just look to
It's just a
clarify,
fact.
and I think that having a list of the employees and the change in composition of the department will be helpful to resolve that,
that's
to that question. I understand there have been additional local inspectors that have been hired. There's a CDBG inspector that has been under the building department. So there's some additional staff. I think.
I'm not
yeah.
arguing the point that there are additional staff. You are standing on a written contract and the argument is that you're holding us to specific performance contracts. I'm simply reading your contract back to you, and I'm saying those performance criteria have not happened.
But I do believe that the contract says additional staff. And I know that the intent was to build out this demolition, the additional job functions associated with the management and supervision of additional employees in the building department. And then above there, it's speaking of the hiring of an additional local inspector and the development of a local maintenance and demolition team. So the composition's changed a bit, but it's still, I think, and we'll have to see exactly how that composition is played out, but it looks like there has been some fluctuation over the last 2 years.
I hear what you're saying.
Any further discussion?
No,
Councilor
and
Thomas?
I understand. I really respect Councilor Bacon and what she has to say, and we do have 1 person, but it does say supervision, management supervision, additional employees. I didn't realize we had 9 employees there total, right?
Correct.
Okay, I mean, I know one time there might have been 5, maybe a few years back. So there are definitely additional employees.
Right.
And as Paul had stated, they might be in different positions and not the position you stated, and I understand that.
Correct.
But I think it's the performance-based evaluation is based on not just that new team that we wanted to have. I think it's based on the employees that are there also.
Through the chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Councilor Bacon?
I would just note that we had lengthy debate in council chambers because it had been years since we had created any additional positions in the city. And the argument for the positions was that this team was going to come together, save thousands of dollars, This was not an argument for building a bigger department and giving somebody a raise because they were supervising 3 or 4 more people. And a CDBG-funded position is a temporary position by its nature. CDBG cannot be used to fund an ongoing permanent position. It's not supposed to be anyway. So I'm not arguing the fact that perhaps he is supervising 3 more people. I'm arguing the fact that this was a new initiative, creating a new team within the department for a specific purpose, which was supposed to save tens of thousands of dollars for the city. And I'm not discounting the work that they have done or the conditions under which some of the people, in a collaborative fashion between DPW, whose people are coming in for 1% raises, by the by, who are collaboratively working with this department, where people have been getting double-digit increases. What I'm objecting to is the money being found within these departments to fund some of the highest paid people in the city, while we're being asked to hit the stabilization fund for other people because we can't find the money to fund their pay raises. So now we've found 6,000, 11,000. There's another transfer before us out of an inspector's line into inspector's pay in the same department. And I'm just saying, if we can find 20,000 that easily, I'm gonna guess that if people sat down with that budget with an eye for finding 100,000, it could happen. And I just think we too easily succumb to the arguments. And I know we don't all agree on the decisions that we've made, but it just, I think, becomes problematic with that when at the 11th hour. And I'm not saying we haven't debated this. We've debated this matter 3 times with, the same arguments each time. So,
Well, if there's
here
no
we
new
are.
arguments.
No new argument.
Let's get it in front of the city council for tomorrow night. Does that sound good?
Sounds good. I'll make a motion to approve the transfer from local inspector to building commissioner of $6,237.
Second?
Motion made second to approve the transfer to put the money back into the line item for building commissioner's salary. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? Passes 3-0. One more item. Back to item 14.
Make a motion to take up item number 14.
Second?
Filed by myself, this is a replacement order from the mayor and from the auditor. It's reading from the stabilization fund, $79,000 to the IT accounts of software license, $44,000, and system hardware, $35,000. Motion to take it off the table for discussion.
So moved.
All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? So moved. This is, when I say replacement, we talked a great deal about the telephone replacement system that took place, emergency type situation last year. And we had at our prior 2 discussions, and we still have in front of us, in order, last time we debated this was May 7th, was an order for this money to come from free cash. And I believe it was our president pointed out that, this is perhaps an item that, doesn't have to be free cash, knowing that we are so pitifully short on free cash to get through this year, as we're finding out, and that this could not only free up some free cash, but it would, might make more sense to take it from stabilization. I don't think there's any more debate about why we're transferring this. This money is needed for exactly what it says, the software license and systems hardware in our department, known as, we call them the IT specialists, that we contract with the G&E. And the reason it is short is, what we've been told is, from the mayor's office to Rory Casey, is the telephone system that replaced when our system went down, completely went down. So the question tonight, or if you want, we can bring that back up, but the question tonight is, do we use stabilization for a one-time expenditure to fund this? Any discussion?
I have a question.
Councilor Bacon.
How is a software license a one-time expense?
It's transferring in to pay for money that was there that was displaced because of the telephone system going down in the middle of the year. And the IT budget, which legitimately took care of the telephone system, needs money to replace. It doesn't say we're doing a telephone system, but we're transferring the money because of the telephone system.
I get the hardware, but I don't get the software license.
It's because, again, it's replacing the money that was used for the new telephone system, which, it was completely down at times. I think we all had the experience of problems. We couldn't call City Hall. It was, and they immediately, and Rory went through, the pains of explaining the new system, but it immediately depleted this account, and we're replacing the money for the telephones, is what we're being asked to do.
So just as a question, I mean, I know it's after the fact, but why didn't they just come in for a capital expense stabilization appropriation to replace the system?
I think that would be a great question to ask the mayor.
Well, but they never do this, and then they come in with this kind of stuff at the end of the year, and it's offensive.
I'm there with you. It would make life a lot easier if we'd have settled this when it was needed. I mean, I'm not making excuses, the story is they, the emergency hit quick.
Yeah, take care.
And I get that, I get
And
that,
they reacted to the emergency.
But, and just to belabor a point, but I don't do this very often, but it's really sticking in my craw to be even talking about taking money out of stabilization when there is such a frivolous attitude that we're out there buying $10,000 fake Christmas trees. It's like a blindness to reality. When we are sitting here looking at taking people's paychecks out of the stabilization fund while at the same time doing frivolous things like that, it just shows a complete insensitivity to the taxpayers that are bearing the brunt of all of this. And most of them go to work every day. They're not they're not blowing out their 401k because they decide they want to go on vacation. And that's what this feels like. It's a slap to them. They're working hard to make ends meet, pay their mortgages, pay their rent, etc. And, we're sitting here talking about breaking the piggy bank, and it just aggravates me. I won't be voting for any of the stabilization monies. Thank
Any
you.
further discussion?
Yeah,
Councilor
just a
Tallman.
question, and then I understand how this happened, and I really understand what Councilor Vacan's saying, because, why couldn't this, it was an emergency, and I sort of wish we could have and I think we did try to take this out of free cash a month ago or a few weeks ago, but the free cash is almost depleted. I don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks, if there's going to be any transfers needed. I think we mentioned something about law department or... Oh, it's on the table, and then the chief, and there was a retirement of $50,000, $40,000 with the fire department. Somebody had retired, so I'm not crazy about taking money out of stabilization either, but I think to make it to the end of the year, if we took this out of free cash, I think we'd be, down to almost, 15, 20, 30, 40,000, so.
You'd have to start saying no instead of yes.
But I think these people have to be paid too. The money has to be put back into there, and my thought is it just, unfortunately has to be done. I don't think this is, it's not really the last minute. This has been going on for about a year. I think just the last couple of months this came to us, this amount, so, that's just my statement. I'm not crazy about doing this, but I think the bill's got to be paid, and just a one-time thing. I don't think it's going to, hopefully it won't hurt our bond rating that much with the small amount, but I can respect Councilor Vacan's thoughts on this, because if you keep doing this, it's going to affect us down the road. Yeah.
Just to clarify, we have both requests in front of us for the same amount. We can do it from stabilization, we can do it from free cash. You heard the numbers earlier in free cash from Bellamy and where we are, and it's the bill that has to be paid. Councilor Bacon.
I would encourage the committee to take it out of free cash. And my other commentary that I will make is, we've had a number of contracts with the city where the people that entered a contract with the city didn't pay the city. Gandera, for one. I wish we were as aggressive chasing after the people who owe us money as we are dedicated to paying the people we owe. And I take no issue with paying people what they're owed. So I just wish we were as aggressive getting paid by the people who owe us. You know, and it's just hard to be taking all this money out of stabilization. We've been sitting here giving people free parking all year. At that microphone, we were gonna be bringing in, what, $200,000, $300,000 because we passed the increased fees, et cetera, et cetera. The thing is, we've gotta start performing and giving the outcomes that we're promising people rather than going and down this slippery slope. I mean, we got to tighten up all ways, because now we're really getting to the brass tacks. That's all. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Sullivan?
Make a motion to deny.
For either one, you mean, you're talking about?
Huh?
You're denying both, either option.
Well, to take it out of stabilization?
Oh, is that what you're saying?
Right. That's the only one that's here in front of us.
No.
No, there's two. Free cash or stabilization.
I'd make a motion to take it out of free cash.
All right, logistically, let's just, we'll vote on one at a time.
Okay.
All right, so on stabilization, Mr. Sullivan is a no, Mr. McGivern is a yes, and Mr. Tallman is a,
Yes, on stabilization.
on free cash, Mr. Sullivan is a yes, Mr. McGivern is a no, Mr. Tallman is a
No.
no. Okay, so they both will be in front of the city council, Ryan, tomorrow night.
Only one of them was, she's the only one who got this agenda, but maybe.
Take the one out of the jacket.
It's identical. I understand the agenda dilemma, but
I'll have them both ready for tomorrow.
it's under the open meeting law, we're acting on the same thing. It's just that we had it separated.
Yep.
Next Monday will be the final meeting of the Finance Committee. Tomorrow night, there's several things coming in and what we tabled this evening, plus the Josie Valentine's order with the assessors. So the chair would love to hear one more motion.
A motion adjourned?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We stand adjourned. Hey, Linda, thank you.
That was a lot. Might be longer.
Right, Marcus gave us all this good stuff.
He might be out of here.